Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lynsey Wilson. Lynsey Wilson was a kind and loving young woman. Lynsey had a deep-seated need for connection and love. Her major misstep was that she misjudged her partner and invested herself in their toxic relationship. Lynsey was 17 when she found out she was pregnant. Growing up in a loving and supportive family, she had never expected to become a mother so young. Although she was emotionally mature. What made it even more difficult was that her boyfriend, whom she had been dating since she was 13, abandoned her as soon as he learned he was going to be a father. His sudden departure left Lynsey feeling both upset and scared. Lynsey was all too familiar with the physical and financial strains of motherhood. Her family, the Wilsons, were loving and close-knit, but they had often struggled to make ends meet. Despite their financial challenges, Lynsey's parents had always worked hard to provide for their children. When Lynsey met Mitchell, 5 months into her pregnancy, she felt like she had been given a rare gift. Mitchell, who was 20 years old at the time, was attentive, caring, and gentle. What impressed Lynsey most was that her pregnancy didn't deter him. Instead, he was eager to be involved and supportive. Mitchell told Lynsey that he had fallen in love with her at first sight and wanted to spend the rest of his life with her, raising her child as his own. To show his commitment, Mitchell began working overtime to ensure that Lynsey and their unborn child would not have to worry about anything. 20-year-old Mitchell was a true gentleman. He was attentive and loving to Lynsey, despite her delicate condition. In fact, Mitchell had fallen deeply in love with her at first sight and wanted to spend his life with her, including raising her child as his own. At the time, Mitchell was earning a good income. However, when they announced their decision to get married, their parents were shocked. They felt that their 5-week relationship was too short to withstand the challenges and circumstances that came with marriage. Despite their concerns, Lynsey relatives noticed a positive change in her since being with Mitchell. She had regained her cheerfulness and good health. However, some of them found Mitchell's behavior to be a bit insincere. Nevertheless, no one interfered with their decision to get married, and instead chose to keep their doubts to themselves. The wedding took place in August 1995, surrounded by a small, intimate group of family and friends, mostly from the bride's side. The groom's side was noticeably underrepresented, with only his parents, a brother, and 2 friends in attendance. Despite the celebratory atmosphere, Lynsey relatives couldn't shake off their uneasy feelings about the union. However, Lynsey herself was over the moon, believing she had found her perfect match. As the evening wore on, their happiness was short-lived. A disagreement erupted, and the newlyweds' argument played out in front of their guests. The reason for Mitchell's outburst seemed trivial, and his reaction was disproportionately intense. The situation escalated, with Mitchell grasping Lynsey's hand and violently shaking her, leaving everyone in attendance stunned and uncomfortable. Mitchell appeared agitated and threatening, causing concern. When he calmed down, he apologized to everyone and made light of the situation, attributing his behavior to holiday stress. Although Lynsey didn't think much of the incident at the time and soon forgot about it, it was actually one of the warning signs of their toxic relationship. After getting married, Mitchell and Lynsey moved into an apartment in Southport, away from their parents. They started their life together and soon welcomed a baby girl named Robin. However, Lynsey soon discovered that her husband had a volatile temper, which cast a shadow over the joy of their new family. Mitchell's moods were unpredictable. One moment he was happy and joking, and the next, he would become aggressive and unreasonable. She thought she was maintaining a delicate balance at home, but in reality, she was giving in to his control. He dictates her every move and gets angry if she misses a phone call or doesn't pick up. Their arguments often ended with Mitchell begging for forgiveness and declaring his love. For a while, it seemed that peace had been restored, but their cycle of arguments became more and more intense. Lynsey struggled to recognize who she once loved. She frequently shared her concerns with her relatives, who urged her to leave the relationship and end her suffering. However, Lynsey found it difficult to acknowledge her mistake and admit defeat. Lynsey's relatives noticed that she often dwelled on memories of the past. Whenever her husband promised to change and return to his gentle and caring ways, Lynsey wanted to believe him and waited for him to fulfill his promises. Meanwhile, Mitchell's controlling behavior intensified. He restricted Lynsey's freedom, forbidding her from going out alone in the evenings and eventually requiring her to be accompanied by him at all times. Despite his possessiveness, Mitchell was seen with other women, sparking Lynsey's suspicions of infidelity. Lynsey confided in her older sister about her concerns, sharing an incident where a woman visited their home, unaware that Mitchell was married. This revelation led to another argument, which escalated into physical violence. Physical abuse gradually became a part of Lynsey's life. To control her and protect his reputation, Mitchell started limiting her interactions with others. He began by restricting her contact with neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, and eventually with her family. Lynsey, unhappy and fearful of being caught and punished, tried to secretly maintain contact with her loved ones. Despite the problems in their relationship, Lynsey stayed with Mitchell. One reason was the comfortable life he provided. He had a good income, supported her and their child, and paid the bills, leaving her without any financial worries. Lynsey's life changed dramatically when she found herself pregnant again. Although her husband, Mitchell, was a good father to her daughter from a previous relationship, she felt that having another child would be unwise in their current circumstances. She decided to have an abortion. When Mitchell found out about her decision, he became furious and verbally and physically abused her. Lynsey packed her belongings and took her daughter to her parents' home. Her family was relieved to see her. At first, Lynsey was happy to be apart from her husband, Mitchell. But over time, she started to miss him. Mitchell, eager to win her back, would call her constantly, begging her to return. Despite initial reservations, Lynsey was eventually won over by Mitchell's claims that he had changed. Everything seems to be back to normal, they are even looking forward to another child. However, their happiness was short-lived. After 6 months, Mitchell's violent temper flared up again. Although he didn't harm Lynsey, who was pregnant at the time, he unleashed his fury on their apartment. He smashed furniture, ripped doors off their hinges, and damaged the walls. He even threw their television out the window and vandalized their car. The landlord, fed up with the destruction, demanded that they pay for the damages and move out. The family's financial situation became even more dire. As a result, they was forced to take out a significant loan and downsize to a smaller, more modest apartment. In October 1997, Lynsey gave birth to their son, Jack. Mitchell was overjoyed at the arrival of his child. However, the relationship between the spouses continued to deteriorate over time. Mitchell often left home for extended periods, sometimes for just a few days, sometimes for an entire week, frequently citing trivial or made-up reasons. Although Lynsey had grown accustomed to her husband's behavior, she eventually reached her breaking point and filed for divorce, returning to her parents' home when Mitchell abandoned her once again. Lynsey realized she couldn't handle the separation from Mitchell on her own, so she reached out to a local charity that supports women in crisis. The charity helped her find affordable housing in a different city, allowing her to start fresh. However, she was worried that Mitchell would find out her new contact information, so she took steps to protect herself. When Mitchell began making threats, she took it a step further and got a restraining order from the police. With the help of a therapist, Lynsey started rebuilding her life. She kept a journal to document her experiences, intending to use it as a warning for her children in the future, so they wouldn't make the same mistakes she did. The journal entries supported what her relatives had said about the problems within the family. Unfortunately, despite her efforts to stay hidden, Mitchell eventually discovered her phone number and began calling her constantly, demanding to see their son. Lynsey, now free, soon felt lonely and couldn't resist her ex's persistence. They started talking and seeing each other again, eventually moving back in together. Ashamed of her weakness, Lynsey kept this a secret, but it eventually came out. Her relatives and friends were shocked and disappointed by her reunion with he they considered a tyrant, and they couldn't understand why she had taken him back. Her relatives continued to dislike Mitchell and cut off most communication with him. Despite their efforts to help her, Lynsey repeatedly returned to the abusive relationship. As a result, her loved ones eventually gave up trying to save her, accepting the situation and distancing themselves. This time, however, Lynsey's decision would prove to have devastating consequences. After Lynsey disclosed her situation, a social worker began monitoring the young family. However, the social worker reported that she had been unable to contact Lynsey for several weeks. Every time she visited the home, Lynsey's husband, Mitchell, would answer the door, and he was also the first to answer any phone calls. Despite the social worker's repeated requests to speak directly with Lynsey, Mitchell would make excuses and prevent her from doing so. The social worker would leave her contact information, but Lynsey never returned her calls. The social worker became concerned for Lynsey's safety and requested a welfare check. When law enforcement responded to the report and visited the address, they too were unable to speak with Lynsey. Mitchell claimed that he had not seen his wife at home for a long time, but he did not consider her missing. Mitchell said that Lynsey participated in a party with a friend on Christmas Eve, returning home early in the morning somewhat intoxicated. This led to an argument with Mitchell. Following the argument, Lynsey packed her belongings and left without saying goodbye to the children. Mitchell claimed Lynsey had left him for another man and no longer wanted to have any contact with him. Mitchell's subsequent media appearances sparked widespread attention. He presented himself as a worried and abandoned husband, pleading for Lynsey to return. However, during these interviews, he also shared intimate details about their marriage, occasionally speaking negatively about his wife. Mitchell believes that Lynsey's actions stemmed from a desire for a lavish lifestyle. He said to have seen her driving an expensive car, which he thought was proof that she had left their children for a wealthy man. Despite her public image, Mitchell was enjoying the freedom of a single life. The search for Lynsey began with conversations with her relatives. During these conversations, it was learned that she was last seen by her family on December 11th. At that time, she appeared to be in high spirits and looking well, with her behavior being normal. During their investigation, detectives were surprised that no one had expressed concern about the young wife's whereabouts for 2 months. However, they soon discovered a plausible explanation. Mitchell had a history of limiting his wife's interactions with others, even close relatives. In the past, her family had difficulty staying in touch with her due to Mitchell's controlling behavior, which made it more believable that Lynsey had intentionally kept a low profile for an extended period. The news of Lynsey's disappearance alarmed everyone, despite the initial assumption that she was not the type to be concerned about. She was known for her modest lifestyle and never drank. Additionally, her husband had restricted her from having any contact with the outside world, including friends and acquaintances. Several inconsistencies in Mitchell's statement to the police raised suspicions about his character. It seemed unlikely that Mitchell would willingly let his wife leave, and that Lynsey would not abandon her children to a controlling husband. To clarify the situation, the police conducted a thorough investigation, interviewing all of Lynsey's acquaintances and searching for anyone who may have seen her after the family gathering. They also questioned their neighbors and obtained surveillance footage from the residential complex and surrounding areas. Lynsey's disappearance was not immediately noticed, and by the time it was. However, investigators later discovered that she was last seen in person on December 15th at the local post office, where she sent several letters and postcards. Her older sister confirmed that they met that day, despite Mitchell's disapproval. During their brief conversation over tea, Lynsey handed her sister a note and asked her to read it later. Unfortunately, the sister forgot about the note in her purse and was unable to find it later, leaving its contents a mystery. As the months passed, investigators grew increasingly suspicious that she was no longer alive, given her prolonged absence and lack of contact. Although they couldn't charge Mitchell without sufficient evidence, their suspicions about him intensified as they learned more about their history and relationship. Lynsey's parents and detectives suspected Mitchell was involved in her disappearance, but lacked concrete evidence. Searches at their home and nearby turned up nothing. In a televised interview, Mitchell denied any wrongdoing, even claiming Lynsey's family would eventually apologize for suspecting him. Just before the holidays, Mitchell sent a postcard in hair dye to the lead investigator. The postcard's sarcastic message mocked the detective, implying he needed confidence and to cover his gray hair. This gesture showcased Mitchell's arrogance, despite portraying himself as a victim in the media. The investigation team held an interview to clarify some aspects of the case, but they didn't reveal all the details. They suggested that Mitchell Key, a well-known family man, was not what he seemed to be. In 2000, Mitchell Key found himself at the center of a scandal when it was discovered that he had been forging his wife's signature to claim social benefits. Although this revelation indirectly supported the theory that he was involved in Lynsey's disappearance, the investigators had trouble making progress due to Mitchell's popularity. Many people defended him, arguing that as a single father, he needed financial assistance. Despite this, the detectives were able to charge him with fraud. Mitchell was found guilty and sentenced to a month of community service. Mitchell's situation took a turn for the worse. The forged signature of his missing wife raised more than a few eyebrows, and the public's outrage grew. As the criticism mounted, Mitchell's composure began to fray, and he lashed out at the media for invading his personal life. In a groundbreaking development, a visitor to an amusement park on June 1, 2000, stumbled upon a disturbing discovery that rekindled the Lynsey disappearance case. Their dog's strange behavior near the roller coaster led to the discovery of human remains. Forensic analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Lynsey, revealing she had been the victim of a violent crime. This breakthrough shifted the investigation's focus to finding the person responsible. On June 7, Mitchell was questioned by detectives for over 36 hours, during which time he eventually cracked under the pressure and confessed to murdering and dismembering his wife. According to his testimony, Lynsey had asked for a divorce on December 15, 1998, after meeting with her sister. This request enraged Mitchell, causing him to attack and strangle her in front of their children. He then hid her body in their bedroom, taking steps to conceal the smell. Realizing he needed help to dispose of the body, Mitchell turned to his brother Elliot, a butcher, for assistance. Although Elliot was initially hesitant, Mitchell eventually convinced him to help. While their children played in the next room, the brothers dismembered Lynsey's body and later scattered her remains throughout the city. The murderer showed no remorse or empathy during his confession. Instead, he seemed to take pride in his actions, saying that without his confession, they would never have been able to prove his guilt. He then led the authorities to the locations where he had hidden the victim's body parts. Unfortunately, her head and one hand were never found. The forensic examination confirmed that all of those of Lynsey, leaving no doubt about Mitchell's guilt. The trial of the Mitchell brothers took place in January 2001 and was a relatively straightforward process. Mitchell was found guilty of first-degree murder and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 17 years. A court-appointed psychiatrist observed that Mitchell displayed classic characteristics of a narcissist with sadistic tendencies. Elliot, Mitchell's brother, was sentenced to 7 years in prison for his role in covering up the crime. Lynsey's children were taken care of by her grandparents, who gave them their last name. 3 months after the sentence, the Wilson family faced another tragedy when one of Lynsey's older brothers, unable to cope with the loss, took his own life in the family's attic. In his goodbye note, he expressed his desire to reunite with Lynsey, saying he saw no point in living in a world he considered cruel. As of 2017, Mitchell Key, Lynsey's murderer, became eligible for parole, but as of January 2023, his parole requests have been denied 3 times. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lily James. Lily was born in the coastal town of Sainsbury, New South Wales, Australia in May 2002. She was the first child of the close-knit James family and was especially loved by her maternal grandmother, Barbara. Growing up, Lily spent much of her time by the ocean with her younger brother Max, where she developed a passion for swimming and an active lifestyle. Her father, a water polo coach at an Anglican girls' school in Hustville, encouraged her interest in the sport. Those who knew Lily remembered her as a friendly and outgoing person who excelled in her studies and was always willing to help those in need. Her well-rounded personality made her a standout student, and she was widely respected by her peers. With her impressive talent and dedication, Lily succeeded in multiple areas, including academia, sports, and community service. She was also an accomplished performer, participating in her school's theater and dance club. Eventually, Lily's talents caught the attention of organizers from the prestigious Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events, attracting over 125,000 attendees from around the world. As part of the celebrations, Lily performed a unique monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. Her performance showcased her impressive skills, charisma, and stage presence, earning her a standing ovation and the jury's approval. She achieved second place in the theater category, a remarkable achievement that earned her recognition and a significant prize. In 2018, Lily achieved another milestone when she passed her beginner's driving test. Her athletic talents also flourished, particularly in water polo, a sport she began competing in professionally, following in her father's footsteps. She won the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category, a feat that delighted her parents. By her final year of school, Lily had decided to pursue a career in sports, and in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to study sports business management. A turning point in her life. In early 2021, she started a new chapter. To break up her college routine and gain teaching experience, she took a job as a water polo coach at St. Andrew's Cathedral School. Her youthful energy, vibrant personality, and passion for sports quickly won over her colleagues, the school administration, and the students she was coaching. The students looked up to her and tried to meet her high standards. In return, she sought to understand each student's unique needs and strengths. That's when she met Paul, the new cricket and hockey coach. His impressive skills and charismatic presence quickly made him the center of attention. As a part-time teacher at another school and a member of the University of New South Wales hockey team, Paul was a driven and accomplished young man. He was particularly popular among the female students and staff. However, opinions about him were divided. Some saw him as arrogant and stubborn, while others appreciated his positive qualities. Initially, Lily and Paul's interactions were friendly but brief, limited to exchanging greetings. Over time, their relationship evolved into something more. Lily's friends reported that Paul asked her out on a date, and she found it difficult to say no due to his charming smile. The date had a profound impact on both of them, leading to a decision to meet again. As Lily got to know Paul better, she began to develop feelings for him, unaware of his true nature. Her kindness and openness made her vulnerable to falling in love. Paul appeared to return her affection, frequently complimenting her, giving her flowers, and planning evenings together. They decided to keep their relationship a secret, especially from the students at school. Lily and her boyfriend, Paul, had agreed to keep their relationship private, adhering to the school's policy and Lily's personal preference for discretion. However, as time passed, rumors about their relationship began to circulate, evolving from hushed whispers to open discussions. When Lily discovered that Paul was the one who had revealed their relationship, she felt deeply hurt and betrayed. Paul's portrayal of her had also led to criticism and judgment from others, causing Lily to feel humiliated. As a result, she confronted Paul about his actions and ended their relationship. Despite Paul's subsequent attempts to apologize and reconcile, Lily remained resolute in her decision. She took some comfort in the fact that their relationship had been brief, allowing her to see Paul's true nature before things escalated further. Paul was born in 1999 in the Netherlands to a wealthy and influential family. When his father's job required a relocation to Australia in 2015, Paul and his family made the move. As an only child, Paul received excessive attention and care from his parents, which significantly contributed to his character development. Unfortunately, this upbringing led to Paul growing up with an entitled and self-centered attitude. Paul was a high-achieving student who excelled academically, athletically, and was physically fit. After moving to a new location, he attended St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he joined the cricket team and quickly gained recognition and respect from his peers for his exceptional skills. He eventually became the team captain and actively participated in organizing extracurricular activities and festivals. While he was well liked by many, particularly they who found him charming, some of his male peers were put off by his confidence and boasts about his ability to win over any girl. Despite this, Paul's charm and charisma earned him many admirers. After graduating in 2017, the school administration offered him a position as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey, which he gladly accepted. He quickly took on a leadership role and successfully managed these sections, feeling confident in his abilities. However, by early 2018, he surprisingly resigned and returned home with his family, citing unknown reasons for his departure. Back home, Paul decided to further his education and earned a master's degree in sports management. Paul had a conversation with old friends and mentioned that he had improved his coaching skills, which led to a job offer from his former employer. He returned to Australia and started working at the familiar school in early 2020. To reduce living expenses, Paul agreed to share an apartment with a friend in Kensington, a suburb of Sydney. Initially, they enjoyed each other's company, socializing after work. However, a few months later, they had a disagreement, and Paul decided to live alone. His parents, who he couldn't visit due to the pandemic, felt that Paul was lonely despite being busy and surrounded by people. They weren't aware of any romantic relationships in his life. By the summer of 2021, as Paul resumed his regular activities, people began to notice a change in his behavior and personality. He picked up where he left off in the sports world, regaining his status as a key player on the hockey team and continuing his active lifestyle, even featuring in promotional advertisements. At the same time, those who knew him observed emerging characteristics that were not present before. Uncontrollable outbursts of anger became a concern. Furthermore, rumors circulated within the school community about his unusual interest in his female students. He would often engage in flirtatious behavior with teenage girls, staring at them for extended periods, leaving them visibly uncomfortable and embarrassed. Paul's importance in the hockey team's progress to the Australian Hockey League finals was evident despite the turmoil in his personal life. His recent breakup with Lily was likely a significant blow to his ego. Unexpected, on October 26, 2023, at approximately 4:30 a.m., the principal of St. Andrew's Cathedral School in central Sydney sent an email to students and parents announcing the school's closure until the end of the week due to a critical incident. A tragedy occurred at the school, prompting a thorough investigation. On Thursday and Friday, a 24-hour consultation center was established in the school library to support those affected. Forensic teams meticulously searched the school building and surrounding area, gathering evidence. The gym was closed off, and the adjacent shower area was scheduled for demolition due to the disturbing discovery made there. The incident began to unfold when the body of a 20-year-old woman was found in the shower around midnight. She had been seen alive just hours earlier. The water polo coach had entered the shower but never emerged. Surveillance footage revealed that someone had followed her around 8 p.m., but the pursuer left the area alone, heading towards the school exit. A family member was later asked to identify the body due to severe facial damage. The victim was identified as Lily James. As the police delved deeper into the case, surveillance footage played a crucial role, and the prime suspect, a young man, was caught on camera multiple times. Investigations were launched into Paul and Lily's cell phone records, helping police track the suspect's last known location using GPS. They also sought to recover the victim's phone, hoping to uncover evidence through text messages that could shed light on the events leading up to the crime. After successfully locating the devices, the police reconstructed the sequence of events, revealing that Paul had purchased a hammer from a hardware store just days before the crime. It seemed he was consumed by anger toward the victim and had planned a confrontation. On the morning of October 25th, Lily followed her routine, attending the university and then heading to her job in the afternoon. Unbeknownst to her, her ex-boyfriend had other plans. Paul rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school, avoiding the building since he had no classes scheduled. He waited in the car, patiently biding his time. Once the students cleared out, he walked into the gym, concealing a hammer under his jacket to avoid drawing attention. From this vantage point, Paul observed Lily's movements, lying in wait for the perfect moment to strike. When Lily finished her training session and decided to take a shower, Paul saw his chance and followed her. An argument erupted, and in the heat of the moment, Paul attacked Lily, striking her head with the hammer. According to the pathologists, the impact was fatal, and Lily died instantly, without suffering. After waiting for an hour, Paul collected Lily's belongings and left the building. He then drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the weapon in a trash can. Security cameras captured footage of him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. His last known location, as tracked by investigators, was the Gap, a cliff in the eastern Sydney suburb of Vaucluse. As the community was still reeling from the initial tragedy, another shocking event occurred. On October 27th, at 8 a.m., shopkeepers at Diamond Bay Reserve in Sydney's eastern suburbs made a disturbing discovery. A man's body was found just 11 miles away from the site of the first crime. A rescue team, including a bomb squad and Marine Corps personnel, was formed to retrieve the body. The body was recovered at 3:30 p.m. and taken for identification. Due to severe injuries, fingerprints were used to identify the individual. The victim was 24-year-old Paul, the same person who had been at the scene of the first crime. The investigation team faced a significant challenge in establishing a connection between the fatal incidents and uncovering the circumstances surrounding the events. The Gap is a notorious location with a history of suicides. Around 10 p.m., Paul used Lily's phone to send a message to her father, possibly revealing the location of her body. An hour later, the young man made a brief emergency call, but hung up quickly. When police arrived at the cliff, they found the personal belongings of Lily and Paul, but there was no sign of him. A rented car was parked nearby, suggesting that he may have taken his own life due to feelings of guilt or fear of facing the consequences of his actions. On October 26th, police launched a search operation for his body, using helicopters and boats to scour the coastline. The first day's efforts were unsuccessful, but the next day, a body was found on rocks in a nearby nature reserve. With Paul deceased, the case was closed, and his parents collected his body, opting to cremate it in Sydney. A meeting was subsequently arranged with Tim Watson Monroe, a renowned forensic psychologist with extensive experience in analyzing the behavior of both criminals and victims. Mr. Watson Monroe was asked to share his insights on the incident and analyze the behavior of the perpetrator, Paul. According to Mr. Watson Monroe, Paul's actions were characteristic of individuals with an inflated sense of self-importance who struggle to accept rejection. He believed that Paul committed the crime in a premeditated and calculating manner, showing no remorse for his actions. When asked about Paul's decision to end his own life, Mr. Watson Monroe provided an explanation. Mr. Watson portrays Paul as a self-centered individual with psychopathic traits. Some have compared the tragic events to the finale of Romeo and Juliet, but the story of Lily and Paul is unique and unfolds in a distinct way. A genuine love relationship cannot thrive with pride, dishonesty, and betrayal. Unfortunately, Paul failed to grasp this, leading him to overlook the value of the person beside him. His decision to prioritize his own wounded ego ultimately resulted in the loss of a bright and vibrant life. This not only caused lasting pain for Lily's family but also for Paul's own loved ones. Regrettably, his actions left a devastating impact on those around him. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lynsey Burbeck. Lynsey was born in Blackburn, Lancashire, northwest England. She and her husband, Tim Burbeck, separated in July 2018, but they continued living together until March 2019. At that time, Lynsey moved to a new home on Burnley Road in Hanko. As a mother, Lynsey cared for her two adult children, Divin, 20, and Sarah, 17. Professionally, she worked as a teacher's aide at Atton Hill Elementary School in Burnley. She enjoyed being around children and was known for her artistic talent. Lynsey would often go the extra mile to create impressive props for school productions. On August 12, Lynsey went for a walk in the wooded area of Coppice, near her Hanko home. However, when her daughter Sarah and Sarah's boyfriend Brandon arrived at the house for a scheduled tea party, Lynsey was nowhere to be found. This was unusual, as Lynsey was not one to forget appointments. Sarah tried calling Lynsey multiple times, but there was no answer. She sent Lynsey a text message saying, "Where are you? We sat outside for an hour and called 6 times." When Lynsey didn't respond, Sarah sent another message with a series of question marks, but still received no reply. After waiting for an hour outside Lynsey's house, Sarah called her father, Tim Burbeck, since her mother was not home and not answering her phone. Tim took Sarah and her brother Brandon to his house around midnight. Later, Sarah and Tim went back to Lynsey's house with a spare set of keys, but Lynsey was nowhere to be found. The house looked undisturbed, and there were no signs of anything out of the ordinary or a note explaining Lynsey's whereabouts. At 12:11 a.m. on August 13th, Tim contacted the police to report Lynsey missing, stating, "Lynsey seems to be missing. We can't find her." Lynsey's disappearance shocked the community, prompting a massive search effort. Hundreds of people, including families with strollers and teenagers, joined the search, even if they didn't know Lynsey personally. After days of searching, posting on social media, and putting up posters, the community gathered at a local spot called Coppice for 2 days, hoping to find a clue to help solve the mystery of Lynsey's disappearance. The search continued non-stop despite the challenges. Thousands of posters with Lynsey's picture were distributed throughout the neighborhood. A Facebook group to aid the search gained 10,000 members. Posters soon appeared everywhere, including lamp posts, storefronts, and traffic lights, asking for help in finding Lynsey. Police launched a thorough investigation into Lynsey's disappearance, conducting extensive searches around her house and the surrounding countryside. A team of specialists, including police officers, dog handlers, firefighters, and mountain rescue volunteers, scoured the area. They also deployed drones and helicopters to cover a wide range, including popular walking and running routes. For days after Lynsey went missing, police released CCTV footage showing her last seen walking along Burnley Road towards Coppus at 4:10 p.m. She was wearing a distinctive purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. As a week passed since her disappearance, hopes of finding Lynsey alive began to dwindle. Despite the efforts of the police, her whereabouts remained a mystery. However, the police emphasized that there was no evidence to suggest she was the victim of a crime, leaving a glimmer of hope that she might still be found alive. That evening, hundreds of local residents joined forces for the first mass public search of Coppus, following a rallying call on social media. A local resident's dog ran into the woods at Errington Cemetery, prompting its owner to follow. The dog didn't respond to its owner's calls, instead hiding its head in the bushes and sniffing at something. As the owner approached, they felt something soft underfoot, which frightened them. A terrible smell and swarming flies surrounded a plastic bag, with what appeared to be a foot visible. On August 24th, Lynsey Wilson's body was discovered 12 days after her disappearance. Her naked body was buried in the cemetery, wrapped in 2 clear plastic bags and mixed with earth and grass, in a shallow grave. With this discovery, the search for Lynsey Wilson was concluded, and a murder investigation officially began. Pathologist Dr. Naomi Carter conducted an autopsy and found that the cause of death was a broken neck, likely caused by a forceful blow from a foot or knee. The trauma was so severe that the entire larynx was crushed. Additionally, it appeared that someone had attempted to cut off the right leg after death, possibly using a saw, leaving a large laceration that cut down to the bone. Due to the poor condition of the body, Dr. Carter had difficulty determining the full extent of the injuries. While she couldn't rule out the possibility of sexual activity on the day of the disappearance, the level of decomposition made it impossible to confirm. Before the body was found, the area had been searched by police and community volunteers for several days, but nothing was discovered. A blue wheelie garbage can was spotted in nearby bushes, but its significance was not yet realized at that stage of the investigation. Volunteers searched the cemetery on August 20th at 9 p.m. and found a dumpster with a dark stain that they suspected might be blood. They took pictures and called the police, who arrived to inspect the dumpster. However, the police officers thought the dark stain was just dirt and noted that the dumpster looked new. With no evidence linking it to Lynsey's disappearance, they left it in place. Other clues were found in the cemetery but weren't immediately considered significant. Christine Alderson, a local resident, discovered a bloody cloth on the grass on August 18th while walking her dogs. She believed the blood was fresh but thought it might belong to a homeless man who often visited the area. Judith Bibby, another dog walker, reported seeing what was likely Lynsey's jacket hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cardiel Hill Trail. On August 25th, investigators returned to the crime scene and discovered a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green heavy-duty gloves near Lynsey's grave. The gloves had blood on them and were sent for forensic testing. The test results showed that the gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside and Lynsey's DNA on the outside of the left glove. Additionally, investigators found a pair of Lynsey's Skechers sneakers in a blue plastic bag in the cemetery. The shoes had been cut along the sole. Further examination revealed that Lynsey's body was wrapped in plastic sheeting, with foliage and grass that didn't match the cemetery grounds between her body and the sheeting. This led investigators to believe that Lynsey's body had been moved from another location. The discovery of the moved body led detectives to recall a blue trash can that had caught the attention of volunteers. Upon reviewing CCTV footage, police officers made a surprising discovery that left the investigation team perplexed. Several images showed a young man pulling a blue wheelie garbage can in the Burley Road area over the course of a few days. A CCTV camera caught the same individual returning to the cemetery on 4 separate occasions. This footage helped identify a suspect. A video of the young man carrying a trash can down the street, possibly containing Lynsey's body, gained widespread attention. The video was broadcast on the news with a request for help identifying the individual, which proved successful. The individual in the video was identified as Rocky Marciano Rocky, a local resident who lived with his parents and 5 siblings on Winnie Hill Road in Arrington. The Rocky family had resided in this home for approximately 3 decades. Rocky struggled with a range of mental health issues, including autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity, which he had experienced since childhood. Additionally, his low IQ presented challenges with learning and communication. Rocky attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick several days a week, where teachers described him as a quiet and nonverbal student. In 2015, a psychologist evaluated Rocky and found he had difficulty understanding his emotions and how they related to events. A 2016 report noted that Rocky was unresponsive to strangers and required constant supervision. According to Timothy Bradley, a teacher at his school, Rocky showed little interest in academics, preferring practical activities. He rarely engaged in conversations, even about topics that interested him. Rocky was physically strong and enjoyed activities like going to the gym, caring for chickens, and playing Xbox. Rocky often seemed detached from reality and unaware of his actions. His attack on Lynsey Wilson appeared to be motivated by a desire to kill a woman, and she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The murder was a random act committed by a stranger. On August 12, 2020, 1 year after the crime, Rocky Marciano Rocky went on trial. After an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict. Rocky, 17, showed no reaction via video link from Her Majesty's Prison, Wetherby. His parents, present in court, also remained expressionless. Rocky had pleaded guilty to aiding in the disposal of Lynsey's body but denied any role in her death. He claimed a male stranger approached him and offered a fee to help bury she. In a prepared statement, Rocky admitted to moving the garbage can and burying the body, but maintained he had no involvement in Lynsey's death. However, evidence collected from his home in Arrington, including identical plastic bags found at Lynsey's grave and a tracksuit matching the one he wore in surveillance footage from August 12, 16, and 17, contradicted his claims. Defense attorney Mark Van Hull stated to the jurors that although Rocky committed a reprehensible act by burying her body in the cemetery, he maintains that Rocky was not responsible for her death, despite the substantial evidence against him. The judge sentenced Rocky to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. He will be eligible for release only when the parole board determines he is no longer a danger to society. The judge described the attack as swift and brutal, and stated that Rocky clearly intended to kill a woman who was walking in the area just minutes before Lynsey's murder. Security footage shows that Rocky Price made 2 return visits to the location where Lynsey was killed on the evening of August 12. At 6:55 p.m., he was captured on CCTV carrying a black backpack, likely containing a saw to dismember the victim's body. At 8:28 p.m., he was seen at the same location, where he would eventually dispose of the body. With no visible signs of panic or distress, Rocky Price carried out a calculated plan to dispose of Lynsey's body. He carefully placed it in a blue trash can, wrapping it in 2 plastic bags, before burying it in a shallow grave at Arrington Cemetery. The fact that he stalked another woman before killing Lynsey Wilson indicates that his crime was premeditated, rather than a spontaneous loss of control. Lynsey's funeral took place at St. Margaret's Church in Hapton on September 20th. Over 200 people attended the service, which was briefly interrupted by police stopping traffic on Manchester Road to allow Lynsey's coffin, adorned with flowers, to be carried into the church. The scene was filled with dozens of bouquets from friends, family, and strangers who were moved by Lynsey's story. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carmen Thomas. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30th, 1987, in South Africa. Her life took a drastic turn when her father passed away when she was just 10 years old. Overwhelmed by grief, her family moved to live with relatives in Whitby, United Kingdom. However, the move did not bring the peace they had hoped for, and they eventually returned to South Africa. When Carmen turned 18, she decided to leave behind with her relatives and later relocated to London to pursue her education. She earned a master's degree in marketing and quickly became known for her charismatic and outgoing personality. Carmen formed strong bonds with many people and became a loyal friend and companion. However, living in a big city like London came with its expenses, and Carmen had to work hard to maintain a decent standard of living. By day, she worked as a marketer in a store, and by night, she worked part-time at a gentleman's club. Although her career choices may have raised eyebrows, Carmen was a woman of principle and never compromised her values. She conducted herself with dignity and earned the respect of her clients. It was during her time at the club that she met Brad Callahan, a charming and flamboyant man. Brad was born in April 1978 in New Zealand to parents who separated when he was just 9 years old. He stayed with his mother and later moved to Australia. Brad graduated from university in 2001 with a degree in construction engineering. He was then offered a job as a chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK by a prominent construction company. To navigate the complex's high-stakes negotiations and enhance his professional status, Brad sought the services of a gentleman's agency, where he met Carmen. She was intelligent, tall, and beautiful, with striking dark eyes and black hair. However, Brad's demanding career and ambitious nature left him little time for a serious relationship. Despite this, Brad and Carmen got along well after a dinner, and their casual interactions eventually blossomed into a solid friendship. Over time, their friendship deepened into a romance, and they began living together. Their relationship was built on mutual trust, care, and support. When Carmen got pregnant, Brad decided it would be better to go back to New Zealand, a country with cleaner air and a more laid-back lifestyle. In March 2005, they returned to Auckland. After the birth of their son Jack, they experienced immense happiness. They prioritized Jack's safety and well-being, making sure he had everything he needed for a happy childhood. However, the arrival of their son brought significant challenges to their relationship. The first problems arose in the relationship between Carmen and Brad due to disagreements on how to raise their child, causing tension and instability. After 3 years, they decided to go their separate ways, but shared joint custody of their son, Jack. The breakup was challenging for both, but they made a genuine effort to maintain a positive relationship for Jack's sake. Carmen and Jack eventually moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, who also lived in Auckland. With time, Carmen regained her emotional balance and started a new life without Brad. In 2008, she and her son relocated to a house on a street near Brad's, so Jack could be close to his father. Having lost her own father at a young age, Carmen wanted to ensure Jack always had a father figure in his life. Despite her decision to live near Brad, Carmen's friends and family believed she and Brad still had a good friendship, but in reality, they only spent time together when it was related to Jack. As time passed, life continued for Carmen. After parting ways, Carmen and Brad each attempted to move on. Brad resumed his career as a construction engineer and, in May 2009, began a new relationship, which ultimately led to an engagement. Meanwhile, Carmen devoted herself to raising their son and, much to Brad's dismay, returned to her work at a gentleman's club. This choice troubled Brad. Carmen repeatedly presented Brad with ultimatums, but he dismissed her requests, focusing on his impending marriage and plans for fatherhood once again. This marked the beginning of adjustments to his financial commitments, specifically affecting the alimony payments for the maintenance of their son, Jack, which Brad made in accordance with their agreement. However, Carmen viewed the financial constraints as a catalyst in an escalating series of conflicts. Tensions escalated until March 19, 2010, when a domestic violence incident occurred. Police responded to a neighbor's call about a dispute and mediated the situation. As a result, Carmen received a formal warning from law enforcement. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Carmen's house to discuss a new school for Jack and to sign a written agreement for child support. However, Carmen was unhappy with the document and asked Brad to leave, yelling that Jack was not his son as he departed. 2 weeks later, Brad tried to contact Carmen again, but she did not respond. On July 13, 2010, Brad reported Carmen missing to the police, who began searching for her. Through video footage and interviews with neighbors, investigators were able to reconstruct a timeline of events leading up to Carmen's disappearance. They discovered that on June 29, a surveillance camera at a nearby supermarket had captured footage of Carmen, providing a potential lead in the search. During their investigation of the rented house where Carmen and Jack lived, police noticed that there was no outdoor garbage can. Inside the house, they found bloodstains on the front door, washing machine, sink, and shower. To confirm the presence of blood, forensic scientists used luminol, a substance that reacts with the iron in hemoglobin. The test revealed multiple patterns of blood on the bathroom door and floor. The landlord reported that on June 29, she heard loud screaming, followed by prolonged crying and moaning. When she knocked on Carmen's door, no one answered. She looked out the window and saw a street trash can and an overturned drying rack, which caught her attention. She called her husband, but before he arrived, Brad walked out of the house, carrying soiled clothes. He told the landlord that Carmen had become ill after a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlord noticed that Brad appeared to have just taken a shower. She had no reason to doubt his story, so she didn't call the police. The search for Carmen continued, and her cell phone activity caught the police's attention. Although messages were being sent from her phone regularly, the tone and language used were unusual and didn't match her previous communication style. The outgoing messages and calls continued until July 10th. During further investigation, Carmen's car was found, and in the back seat, they discovered her luggage, clothes, and other personal belongings. The police investigation into Carmen's disappearance began with the examination of her seized suitcase, which revealed traces of blood and a note indicating she owed money to her employer. An envelope with Misty's name and $270 was also found in the glove compartment. Inspector Mark Benefield suspected foul play after finding blood in the car and launched a search for Carmen's body in the countryside southeast of Auckland, but it was inconclusive. As the investigation continued, police analyzed Carmen's and Brad's phones, discovering they had been in close proximity to each other during the search. However, Carmen's phone was not connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. A crucial piece of evidence was a missing trash can, which had disappeared from its usual spot near the house on the day Carmen vanished. A neighbor reported seeing the can being taken away through her window. Police suspected the trash can might have been used to dispose of evidence. When EE examined Brad's phone records and bank card details, then they found that on June 30th, Brad had purchased a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and several garbage bags, which raised suspicions. By studying Brad's daily routine, police identified some unusual events, including a day when he arrived early at the construction site and walked alone around the property for an extended period. While it was not unusual for a supervisor to be on site early, the police found it noteworthy. After gathering evidence, including Carmen's cell phone and suspicious purchases, they began to suspect Brad of murder. They believed Brad had killed his former lover, Carmen Thomas, by hitting her multiple times in the head and then carefully hiding her body. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with Carmen's murder and attempting to obstruct justice. Brad's second son was born while he was in custody, causing him to become emotional and resentful. 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators the location of Carmen's body. It turned out that Brad had attempted to create an alibi by making it seem like Carmen had left for Hamilton and never returned. However, under questioning, he eventually detailed the events of the day Carmen was killed, revealing that his plan had not been as perfect as he thought. Brad admitted that Carmen and Brad had a heated argument, which ended with Carmen telling Brad that Jack was not his son. In a fit of rage, Carmen kicked Brad out of the house. However, he returned 5 minutes later, grabbed a baseball bat, and brutally attacked Carmen, striking her in the head with such force that she fell unconscious, bleeding profusely. Despite realizing the gravity of his actions, Brad continued to assault Carmen, throwing several punches. Memories of happier times flashed before his eyes, but his anger and resentment consumed him. Brad knew his life would never be the same after this moment, and he could never undo the damage. Nevertheless, he felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, believing that he had solved his problem and ensured that Jack was now his alone. Brad regained his composure, took a shower, and quietly left Carmen's house. In the following days, he devised a plan to dispose of Carmen's body and cover up the crime. He met his friend outside a supermarket and asked him to buy black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning products, hoping to avoid raising suspicion. Brad then returned to the apartment, meticulously cleaned up the bloodstains, wrapped Carmen's body in a bag, and disposed of it in a trash can. After killing Carmen, Brad dismembered her body into 8 pieces to make it easier to dispose of. He cut off her legs at the hip joints and then cut each leg in half at the knee. He also severed her arms and head from her torso. A few days later, on July 3rd, Brad met a friend at a boat ramp in Oahu Bay, near downtown Oakland. He confessed to his friend that he had killed Carmen during an argument and asked for help disposing of her body. However, his friend refused to provide a boat to dump the remains into the sea. Over the next few days, Brad drove to Ware Ridge in West Auckland and buried the dismembered body parts in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot. He left a suitcase of clothes and some of her personal belongings in the car to make it seem like she had left voluntarily. However, he made a critical mistake by including bloody clothes in the suitcase. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Brad started sending text messages from Carmen's cell phone to her friends, pretending to be her. He claimed that she was not feeling well and had been in bad shape for days. However, this plan ultimately backfired on him. On October 1st, police excavated the burial site indicated by Brad and found the body of Carmen Thomas. Her remains were discovered in plastic containers, carefully removed from a makeshift grave on Wayfair Ridge. An autopsy revealed that Carmen Thomas had died from multiple blows to the head, with the fatal blow causing a compressed skull fracture. After multiple forensic examinations, Carmen's body was released to her family on October 13th. Tragically, her young son Jack, who had been waiting and hoping to see his mother again, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket. On February 8, 2011, Brad Callahan's first court hearing was held. Judge Winning determined that the crime was unintentional and took into account Brad's claim that he acted impulsively in a state of rage. However, the judge was more severe in his assessment of the subsequent cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was charged with attempting to change the course of justice. A retrial was held on November 25, 2011, where police officers filled the High Court in Auckland. In a surprise move, Brad Callahan made 2 guilty pleas, admitting to murder and attempting to change the course of justice after Carmen's death. A judge has sentenced 31-year-old Brad Callahan to life in prison for murdering Carmen Thomas. Brad was also given a 6-year sentence for attempting to interfere with the investigation into Thomas's death. The judge considered this one of the most serious cases of attempted interference with justice, describing Brad's actions as extremely serious. During the trial at Auckland High Court, the judge criticized the brutality of Thomas's murder, but decided not to impose the harshest possible sentence. The courtroom was filled with Thomas's friends and family, including her parents who had traveled from South Africa. Judge Venin condemned Brad's attempts to cover up his crime, which involved considerable effort and deception. The 6-year sentence for interfering with the investigation will be served at the same time as the life sentence. In a statement, the Thomas family expressed their ongoing anger and grief, saying that no punishment can bring their daughter back. However, they are relieved that Brad will be in prison for a long time, giving him the opportunity to reflect on the harm he has caused. Little boy Jack Brad is living with his grandmother in another town under an assumed name. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Natalee Holloway. Natalee Holloway was born on October 21, 1986, in Clinton, Mississippi, to Elizabeth and David Edward Holloway. Her parents had a loving relationship that began in their youth, but after 13 years of marriage, they divorced due to the stresses of domestic life. Following the divorce, Natalee and her brother Matthew lived with their mother, who continued to receive emotional and financial support from their father. In 2000, Elizabeth remarried to George Twitty, a businessman from Alabama, and the family moved to Mountain Brook. The transition was seamless, and Natalee and her brother remained close to their father, visiting him regularly during holidays. Natalee's upbringing was deeply influenced by her family's strong Christian values, which emphasized kindness, modesty, and community involvement. As a result, she developed into a compassionate and humble individual who prioritized her studies and extracurricular activities over social events. Despite her popularity, Natalee chose not to attend parties or go on dates, instead focusing on her goals and aspirations. She was an excellent student, a skilled dancer, and an active member of various clubs, with ambitions to pursue a career in medicine and secure a scholarship to a local university. On May 26, 2005, Natalee joined 123 other students and 7 chaperones on a trip to a beautiful Aruba island. The group of 18-year-olds stayed at the Holiday Inn and spent their time relaxing on the beach, swimming, and enjoying the local restaurants and entertainment. They made the most of their trip, dancing into the early hours of the morning. On the night of May 29th to 30th, Natalee was initially acting normally in socializing while sober. However, after consuming a drink given to her by Joran, her behavior changed, indicating that she may have been under the influence of a substance. The staff at Carlos and Charlie's bar had a positive opinion of Natalee, but viewed Joran unfavorably due to his history of poor behavior, gambling, and substance abuse. Joran had a reputation for renting hotel rooms with friends, where they would invite foreign women and secretly record their activities, later uploading the videos online. Natalee Holloway's disappearance began with a frantic phone call from her mother, Elizabeth Twitty. After failing to reach her daughter, Elizabeth contacted one of the trip's chaperones to report her concerns. Elizabeth's instincts told her something was wrong, as Natalee was a responsible and punctual person who always stayed in touch. When Natalee didn't return to the airport with the rest of the group on May 30th, Elizabeth's worst fears were confirmed. Her belongings, including her phone and passport, were still at the hotel, but Natalee was nowhere to be found. Elizabeth and her husband quickly flew to Aruba to search for their missing daughter. When Elizabeth arrived in Aruba, she discovered more about Natalee's disappearance than the police had. Unfortunately, the authorities didn't seem to be in a hurry to investigate and initially disregarded Elizabeth's concerns. This type of case isn't unusual in Aruba, and the police appeared to be taking it lightly. They implied that it was common for tourists to miss their flights or lose track of their group, and that Natalie was probably just having fun, drinking, or socializing with new people. Natalie's last known whereabouts were on May 30th at around 1:30 a.m., when she left a bar with a man named Van der Sloot. They got into a car with two other young men, and that's the last time she was seen. Natalie and her friends had been spending time at the notorious Carlos and Charlie's nightclub and casino. On one of those nights, she met a 17-year-old local named Joran, who offered to buy her a drink. He then invited her to visit a lighthouse and see sharks in the area. As they left the club, a silver Honda car driven by the Deepak Kalpoe brothers was waiting for them. Elizabeth contacted the police for a second time 4 hours later, and this time she shared some concerning information. As a result, the three individuals were detained. Van der Sloot initially claimed he didn't know Natalie, but eventually admitted he had left the bar with her. According to him, they spent some time driving around, stopped by the beach, and later dropped Natalie off near her hotel. Deepak Kalpoe brothers, 18, and the 21-year-old, confirmed Van der Sloot's story. It's worth noting that the three were questioned together by the police, an approach that seems questionable from a law enforcement perspective. Later on, they altered their statements multiple times. Despite his questionable behavior, Joran was never held accountable for his actions. None of the charges against him went to court. It was later discovered that Joran's father, Paulus van der Sloot, was a well-known lawyer who was seeking a judgeship. Apparently, corruption was prevalent in Aruba, allowing individuals like Joran to avoid accountability for their actions. As the investigation continued, David Holloway, Natalie's father, arrived in Aruba and joined the search efforts, which were led by his ex-wife and journalists. As public pressure mounted, it was discovered that the hotel's surveillance cameras did not capture the suspect's car, and there was no footage of Natalie entering the building on May 30th. This revelation contradicted the statements of Joran and the Kalpoe brothers, who were subsequently called in for questioning again. During this second round of questioning, one of the Kalpoe brothers unexpectedly changed his story, claiming that he had dropped Natalie off at a location before reaching the hotel, which was not covered by surveillance cameras. He also added that he had seen a figure in black approaching Natalie, who was later revealed to be one of the hotel's security guards. On June 5th, investigators took into custody the hotel security staff who were working the night Natalie disappeared. 4 days later, on June 9th, detectives arrested 3 people, including 2 of the Kalpoe brothers, due to suspicious circumstances. While in jail, one of the security guards learned something important from the Kalpoe brothers. Satish admitted that he and his brother Deepak had lied to protect their friend Joran. In reality, they had left Joran alone with Natalie on the beach and had gone their separate ways. The security guards were released on June 13th. A few days later, on June 17th, police detained Steve Gregory Cruz, a DJ who had worked on yacht parties, because they suspected he might be involved in Natalie's disappearance. On June 22nd, Paulus van der Sloot, Joran's father, was questioned and detained by police, but he was released on June 26th along with Steve Cruz because there was not enough evidence. Joran later changed his story again, this time blaming the Kalpoe brothers for Natalie's disappearance. He claimed that he had said goodbye to Natalie near his home and that she had left with the brothers. However, his new story was not believable. The Kalpoe brothers' lawyer responded to Joran's accusations. After a short trial on July 4th, the Kalpoe brothers were released from custody. At the same time, Joran's time in custody was extended by 2 more months. Despite the growing evidence, the police seemed to be ignoring Joran's possible involvement in Natalie's disappearance. Joran van der Sloot was born on August 6, 1987, in Arnhem, Netherlands, to Paulus van der Sloot, a lawyer, and Anita van der Sloot-Hugen, an art teacher. He was one of 3 brothers in a large family that moved to Aruba in 1990. Joran grew up on the island, where he attended the International School of Aruba and excelled academically. He also developed a passion for sports, particularly soccer and tennis, and showed promise in these areas. Joran's family life was complicated. As a child, he was closer to his father, but his relationship with his mother was strained. Anita considered Joran dishonest and struggled to instill good values in him. She remembered him as a rebellious child who frequently ran away from home. As Joran entered adulthood, he began to associate with a questionable crowd and developed a taste for gambling. Despite this, he presented himself as confident and fearless to his friends, which initially impressed many people. However, locals were wary of Joran, sensing that his permissive behavior would eventually lead to trouble. Joran was popular with girls, but he often took advantage of them. Overall, people had mixed opinions about Joran, with some being drawn to his charismatic personality and others being put off by his questionable behavior. As the investigation into the suspects continued, the search for Natalee Holloway remained ongoing. U.S. authorities assisted by closely monitoring the progress and providing significant financial support to aid in the search for the Natalee. Although the Aruban authorities were not pleased with the increased scrutiny, they accepted the funding. On August 26, the police detained the Calpo brothers and another young man, but this was unrelated to the case. The arrest was an attempt to intimidate them into talking. All 4 were released on bail on September 3, 2005, and a week and a half later, all restrictions were lifted. Joran van der Sloot spent about 3 months in custody. After his release, he reveled in the notoriety, giving interviews and appearing on TV shows. He claimed Natalee Holloway was flirtatious and offered intimacy, but he declined due to lack of contraception. When questioned about his credibility, Joran threw a glass at the interviewer, showcasing his impulsiveness and aggression. According to the recorder, Joran van der Sloot was confessing to witnessing Natalee Holloway's death on the beach in Aruba. He claimed they were intimate before she lost consciousness, and despite trying CPR, she died. Van der Sloot said he and a friend disposed of her body at sea. Despite the damning recording, Van der Sloot again avoided consequences, quickly denying his statement after it aired. In his 2007 book, The Case of Natalee Holloway, My Own Account, Van der Sloot maintained his innocence, apologizing to Natalee's family and providing his account of events, despite ceasing search efforts by authorities. In 2008, 2 new witnesses came forward in the case. One reported seeing Joran and his father on the beach near the Holiday Inn on May 30, 2005, around 4 a.m. Joran appeared disheveled and shirtless. The witness saw them arguing in a car before driving away. However, Paula's had an alibi for the night of Natalee's disappearance. Joran's former girlfriend also came forward, recalling a comment he made about easily disposing of a body. However, Joran was known for lying and exaggerating. Despite these developments, Joran and the Calpo brothers were detained and released multiple times. The Holloway family hired a private investigator, Tim Miller, who searched the landfill and discovered oversights by the island's police, including failure to interview Natalee's classmates or hotel room neighbors. Natalee's electronic room key was used several times on the night of her disappearance, and she left behind her rare and expensive mobile phone. A male DNA was found on her toothbrush. The investigation's flaws were exposed. After his father's death, Joran contacted the Holloway family, offering to reveal the truth about Natalee's disappearance for a $250,000 reward. He claimed he wanted to clear his conscience, but was actually blackmailing them. The Holloways, desperate for answers, paid Joran $25,000 to meet with their lawyer, John Kelly, in Aruba. Joran provided a new account of events, claiming Natalee resisted his sexual assault, struggled, and hit her head on a rock after he pushed her. He then buried her body in a building foundation. Elizabeth Twitty followed up on Joran's claims by contacting the police. However, verifying his story was simple, and it quickly became apparent that the house he pointed to had been built long before Natalie's disappearance. As a result, the police concluded that his testimony was insufficient to warrant an arrest. It was widely believed that Joran had fabricated another lie to obtain money, and after receiving the funds, he fled to Peru. In another case, on June 1, 2010, the body of 21-year-old Stephanie Tatiana Flores Ramirez was found in a hotel room in Lima, Peru. She had suffered severe injuries and died from a neck fracture. The case drew significant media attention due to the victim's father being a well-known businessman and former Formula One driver. Surveillance footage quickly identified the perpetrator. Surprisingly, the perpetrator was Joran van der Sloot. He was arrested and taken into custody. He claimed to have met Stephanie at the Atlantic City Casino on May 30th, where they played poker together. They then decided to continue their time in his hotel room, where they gambled at an online casino. Stephanie discovered disturbing information on Joran's laptop while he was in the bathroom. She learned that he was a suspect in the disappearance of Natalie Holloway, which frightened her and made her want to leave. However, Joran caught her and became enraged when he realized what she had found. He physically attacked her until he was certain she was dead. After the attack, Joran showered and left the scene, instructing the staff not to disturb Stephanie, falsely claiming she was sleeping. Her body was found 3 days later, on June 3rd. Joran was caught on June 4th while trying to flee to Chile and subsequently confessed to the crime. The news of the murder shocked the U.S., especially given that it occurred exactly 5 years after Natalie Holloway's disappearance. Elizabeth Twitty, Natalie's mother, was moved by the news, saying that justice had finally been served, but at a terrible cost. On January 11, 2012, Joran van der Sloot was sentenced to 28 years in prison for Stephanie's murder and ordered to pay the Ramirez family $75,000 in compensation. Joran was first imprisoned at Pedras Gordas, but was later moved to Chalipala in 2014. During his incarceration, he married a Peruvian woman he met in 2010 while she was visiting another inmate. She believed that Joran had genuinely changed and become a better person, describing him as attentive and gentle during their time together. However, this proved to be a facade, as Joran was actually using her for his own benefit and showed no remorse for his past actions. Meanwhile, Natalie Holloway's family was seeking closure. In June 2011, her father, David Holloway, filed a petition in an Alabama court to have Natalie declared legally deceased. Natalie's mother opposed this move, holding on to the hope that Joran would eventually confess to the crime and face trial. After 2 hearings, Judge Alan King ruled in favor of the declaration, stating that all necessary requirements had been met. On January 12, 2012, the court officially declared Natalie deceased. On June 8, 2023, van der Sloot was extradited to the United States and taken to the Hoover City Jail in Alabama. The next day, he was charged with extortion and wire fraud, but he denied all charges. However, on October 18, 2023, he changed his plea and admitted to murdering Natalie Holloway. He confessed to killing her on May 30, 2005, by hitting her with a cinder block after she rejected his advances, and then disposing of her body in the ocean where it was likely consumed by sharks. Although van der Sloot confessed to the crime as part of a plea deal, this confession cannot be used as evidence in court. As a result, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, which will be served at the same time as his existing prison term in Peru. Despite the confession, Natalie Holloway's disappearance remains an open case in Aruba, and her murder has gone unpunished due to a series of cover-ups, corrupt deals, and bureaucratic delays, despite widespread international attention to the investigation. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Abril Perez. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971, in Monterrey, northeastern Mexico, to parents Maria del Seguro Sagan and Manuel Perez. She was the second of 3 children. Abril demonstrated exceptional mathematical and entrepreneurial abilities from a young age. She was a dedicated reader and consistently ranked as the top student in her class. As a teenager, Abril prioritized achieving financial independence, showcasing remarkable discipline and effective time management skills. Following high school, Abril attended the most prestigious university in New Leon, where she obtained a master's degree in finance and business administration. Her peers described her as intelligent, focused, and ambitious, while also being kind, cheerful, and always willing to assist others. After graduating, Abril secured a position in the sales department of one of the country's largest and fastest-growing companies. She later transitioned into digital sales, a rapidly expanding field, and discovered her true passion. Abril quickly rose through the ranks and became the executive director of the company within 2 years. Abril was a young, beautiful, and successful woman who was rapidly achieving her life goals. She had built a stellar career, supported her family, and had big plans for the future. However, her personal life was still unfulfilled, which worried her loved ones. Despite this, Abril was confident that she would find true love and live a long, happy life. But she had no idea how her future marriage to the seemingly perfect man would turn out. That man was Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, whom she met in the mid-1990s when her career was taking off. Juan Carlos was just 3 years older than Abril and shared her ambitious drive, which drew her to him. He, in turn, was captivated by her stunning looks, charming personality, kind heart, bright smile, sharp intellect, and remarkable determination. Juan Carlos graduated from a prestigious science and technology university, where he excelled in economics and trade. He then continued his studies at Harvard University in the United States. After returning to Mexico, he built a successful career in the emerging field of e-commerce. Juan Carlos and Abril met at a conference on the latest financial technologies. Their companies collaborated on several projects, allowing them to cross paths multiple times. Eventually, Juan Carlos realized he had developed feelings for Abril, who was intelligent and beautiful. He obtained her phone number through mutual acquaintances and asked her out on a date. Abril was also attracted to Juan Carlos, finding him to be educated, elegant, and engaging in conversation on a wide range of topics. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and by 1998, they decided to get married. At that point, they had both achieved significant success in their careers and were working on developing online stores, a field with great potential. Their life seemed like a fairy tale, inspiring envy and admiration from those around them. However, surface of their perfect family, there were some dark secrets. It wasn't until 2001, 3 years after their wedding, that they had their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia. The arrival of their child marked a new chapter in their lives. Her husband appeared happy, showing their newborn daughter love and admiration. 2 years later, Abril gave birth to a son, named Juan Carlos Jr., after his father. 2 more years passed, and the family had another child, a boy named Julio Andres. Despite having 3 young children, Abril hardly took any time off work and managed to balance parenting with career advancement. She made homemade meals, helped with schoolwork, took the children to sports activities, and aimed to be both a perfect mother and their best friend. Outwardly, the Perez Sanchez family seemed perfect, wealthy, successful, with 3 lovely children, and everything they could want. However, their home life remained a secret, even from their closest relatives, for a long time. In the early years of their relationship, Juan Carlos revealed his true personality to Abril. He had a short temper, was aggressive, and had a tendency to be overly harsh, refusing to compromise and insisting that everything be done his way. Initially, Abril was in love and believed that as time passed, Juan Carlos's rough edges would smooth out. Their shared projects brought them together, and their collaboration led to significant accomplishments, including financial success. However, as the years went by, Juan Carlos's irritability grew, and verbal arguments escalated into physical confrontations. Following the birth of their first daughter, he made a brief effort to control his emotions, but this change was short-lived. A similar attempt was made after the birth of their eldest son, but by the time their third child arrived, Juan Carlos no longer made any effort to be a good father or husband. Juan Carlos frequently directed his anger and frustration at Abril and disregarding her emotional well-being. He would insult and belittle her, the mother of his children, and seemed to feel better when she cried. He regularly physically harmed her, doing so in a way that left no visible marks, allowing her to hide the bruises with clothing or makeup. His goal was to maintain his reputation as a model family man, loving husband, and father. Abril kept quiet about the abuse for years, not even telling her sister and mother about the ongoing situation. She earned a good income and could have raised the children on her own, providing them with a good education and stable upbringing. However, her husband was wealthy and influential, and she knew he could use the courts to take the children away from her. Knowing Juan Carlos's true nature, Abril couldn't bear the thought of her children being left alone with him, as she considered him a monster capable of anything. When the family situation reached a boiling point, what was once considered an ideal household now raised suspicions that something was terribly wrong. Abril was not just subdued, but deeply distressed and visibly struggling. She had lost weight, slept poorly, and frequently had bruises on her face and body that were becoming harder to hide and explain. Despite this, Juan Carlos appeared calm and confident in public, pretending that everything was fine. He played the role of a loving and caring husband, interacting with Abril politely and affectionately. However, at home, he transformed into a menacing figure. Despite loved ones urging Abril to divorce him, she insisted that everything was fine and that she could handle the problems with her husband on her own. 2014 marked the peak of Juan Carlos' career when he became the head of a major trading company, making him one of the most influential people in his field. Following this promotion, his family relocated to Mexico City, settling into a large house in one of the capital's upscale neighborhoods. Their children began attending an elite private school. Abril had genuinely hoped that this change of environment would improve their relationship. However, contrary to her expectations, the abuse continued. Juan Carlos often persisted in physically and verbally abusing his wife in front of their children. He increasingly accused her of infidelity without any basis for his claims. Whenever she tried to defend herself, he would resort to physical violence, insisting he would find evidence of her supposed disloyalty. Juan Carlos monitored her phone and emails, forbade her from using social media, and when finding no evidence, he hired a private detective to follow her and photograph any men who came near her. For 4 years, she tried every possible way to save her marriage. Despite her efforts, her husband's behavior became increasingly unbearable, creating a never-ending nightmare for her. To outsiders, however, their union appeared happy and successful, even enviable, due to her husband's wealth, influence, and seemingly caring nature. In 2018, the Juan Carlos and Abril visited to the Abril's family. During this trip, Juan Carlos treated his wife poorly in front of her parents, who were deeply disturbed by what they saw. This incident marked a turning point for Abril, and she realized that she could no longer continue living this way. She informed her husband that she would file for divorce as soon as they returned to Mexico City. Hearing this, Juan Carlos became enraged, grabbed her throat, and squeezed it so tightly that she nearly lost consciousness. Fortunately, her mother, Maria del Soro, entered the room and raised the alarm, preventing a tragedy. When the family returned to their home in the capital, Abril prepared for divorce and moved from the marital bedroom to a small guest room. However, this did not keep her safe from her husband's abuse. On January 4th, while Abril was still asleep, her husband entered the room holding a baseball bat. He struck her hard on the head and was about to swing again. Half awake, Abril barely understood what was happening, but she managed to roll off the bed just in time, saving her own life. She began to scream, and the children ran into the room, having heard the noise. The youngest son shielded his mother with his body, while the eldest son took the bat away from his father. Together, they fled the house and headed to the hospital, as Abril needed medical attention. Doctors diagnosed Abril with a severe concussion and a deep laceration above her eyebrow that required stitches. After Abril and their sons left the house, Juan Carlos contacted his lawyer to discuss the situation and asked for help in resolving the marital conflict. However, Juan Carlos also posted on social media, accusing his wife of betraying him by being unfaithful and planning to leave him for another man, taking their children and attempting to claim all their jointly acquired assets. Additionally, Juan Carlos claimed that Abril had stolen all the money from their home safe and had injured him with a knife when he tried to stop her. He posted photos of a bloodied knife and brown stains on the floor as evidence. However, the blood on the floor actually belonged to Abril from her own injury, and the knife photo was taken from the internet. Despite the fabrication, Juan Carlos's friends believed his story and actively shared and reposted his account on their social media pages, calling for widespread attention to this supposedly egregious case. Juan Carlos's attempt to kill Abril prompted her to take swift action. From her hospital bed, she filed a police report against him, accusing him of trying to take her life. After her release from the hospital, Abril packed up her 2 young sons and left the family home. Her oldest child, who was attending college in a nearby city, also condemned his father's violent actions. While waiting for justice, she started providing online support and consultations to women who were going through similar experiences. She also planned to open a center that would offer psychological and legal help to victims of domestic violence who had been failed by the justice system. It wasn't until 8.5 months after the incident, in September 2019, that Juan Carlos was finally arrested and charged with inflicting bodily harm and attempting to kill his wife. He was put in jail, where he spent over a month, but he managed to appeal the decision to keep him in detention before his trial. As a result, he was released from jail by November of that year. Judge Federo presided over the case, reclassifying it and ordering a new trial. During the trial, Abril's medical records and photos were not presented as evidence. Her and her son's testimonies were deemed insufficient to detain Juan Carlos, because he claimed Abril was manipulating their children against him. The judge released Juan Carlos, concluding his actions didn't pose a direct threat to Abril's life. Abril was shocked and terrified when Juan Carlos was released. She suspected he had bribed his way to freedom, putting her and their children in danger. She wrote to the judge, expressing her fear, but it had no immediate effect. Juan Carlos then initiated a custody battle, forcing Abril to return to Mexico City with their sons to attend court hearings. Abril arrived in Mexico City on November 25th with her children. She had a legitimate fear of her longtime partner and wanted to avoid him. To minimize the risk of an encounter, she planned to leave the city immediately after a court hearing that day. In fact, she had already bought the plane ticket, but Juan Carlos already knew that. After the court session, Abril, her sons, and their lawyer got into a car headed to the airport. However, they never made it to their destination. At a traffic light, a motorcyclist suddenly pulled up next to their car, drew a handgun, and fired 2 shots at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. The attacker then quickly fled the scene. A shooting occurred, and one of the bullets grazed the younger son, who was sitting in the back seat. Fortunately, none of the children were seriously injured. However, the injured Abril was rushed to the nearest hospital where doctors fought to save her life for more than 6 hours. Unfortunately, due to severe injuries and significant blood loss, they were unable to save her. Abril passed away that evening. The victim's family, including her parents, brother, and sister, immediately flew to the capital and urged authorities to arrest Juan Carlos, whom they believed was behind the brutal act. However, law enforcement had a different perspective, stating that without identifying the shooter, it was difficult to determine the motive behind the attack. They also noted that they could not confirm with certainty that the shooting was ordered by Juan Carlos. The tragic case of murder sparked widespread outrage and public debate. Abril's family successfully drew attention to the case, highlighting numerous instances where men had attempted to kill women but escaped punishment. In response to the public outcry, the Mexican General Prosecutor's Office launched a new investigation into the suspect, Juan Carlos Sanchez, and also examined the actions of the judges who had previously released him. The judges who had released Juan Carlos could face consequences for their role in the Abril death if his guilt was proven. Juan Carlos took to social media to demand justice for his former wife's murder. However, his daughter, Ana Cecilia, accused him of cruelty and shared photos of her mother's hospitalization after Juan Carlos had attacked her with a bat, contradicting her father's claims that he would never harm her mother. Despite the media attention surrounding the case, he was initially allowed to remain free during the investigation. However, he was required to check in with the police weekly and was placed under a restraining order. When he failed to appear at the scheduled time, a warrant was issued for his arrest for violating the order. As expected, Juan Carlos could not be found, and it was later discovered that he had used his wealth and connections to quickly leave the country and enter the United States. Mexican authorities contacted Interpol, reporting Juan Carlos as a fugitive accused of a serious crime, and he was subsequently declared wanted worldwide. Meanwhile, efforts were underway to locate criminals in Abril's assassination. Surveillance footage from street cameras revealed that the motorcyclist who committed the crime was not alone. Two vehicles were seen following the car carrying Abril. The motorcyclist appeared to be in constant communication with the occupants of these vehicles, receiving directions and instructions. After several months of investigation, some of the participants were identified, and on March 5, 2020, two suspects were arrested in connection with the case. To everyone's surprise, the suspects did not resist arrest and quickly began cooperating with authorities, hoping to receive lighter sentences. It was confirmed that Juan Carlos was the mastermind behind the crime, and he had paid a significant amount of money to individuals who were directly involved in the crime. The first to be caught were the driver of one of the getaway cars and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. It was discovered that while Juan Carlos was in prison, he had hired two experienced criminals to act as his personal bodyguards. One of these bodyguards was released from prison a week before Juan Carlos, and the other was released several days after him. After being released from prison, Juan Carlos reconnected with his accomplices and asked them to recruit trustworthy individuals to help carry out the murder of a person in exchange for a large sum of money. Once all participants were in place, Juan Carlos provided detailed instructions about the intended victim's travel schedule and mode of transportation. However, luring his former wife to Mexico City proved to be a challenge. Juan Carlos used coercion, threatening to take their children unless she attended a court appearance. Despite attending the court date, his ex-wife intended to return to Monterrey on the same day, which Juan Carlos knew about through his sources. 3 more individuals involved in the conspiracy were arrested in late October 2020. Initially, they were taken into custody on suspicion of distributing controlled substances, but further investigation at the police station revealed their potential connection to the high-profile crime. The arrested individuals were part of a major drug trafficking gang led by Balto, who had previously served time with Juan Carlos and offered him protection. In exchange for a significant reward, Balto agreed to help Juan Carlos eliminate his ex-wife. A few weeks later, in November 2020, Maldonado, an individual involved in the case, was also arrested. During his testimony, he confirmed that Juan Carlos had sought out reliable individuals to kill his ex-wife and that he had agreed to assist in exchange for a substantial reward. The investigation confirmed that Juan Carlos was the mastermind behind the crime. His earlier attack on Abril with a stick was reclassified as an attempted murder. As a result, the court issued an arrest warrant for Juan Carlos on charges of femicide. However, his location remained unknown. By spring 2021, the remaining suspects involved in the murder of Abril were apprehended. One of them was already serving time for a separate crime. The searches also led to the discovery of the gun used to kill Abril. In total, 9 individuals linked to the same criminal organization were detained, with 7 of them directly involved in the pursuit and shooting of Abril. More than 4 years after the Abril murder, the mastermind behind the crime, Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, is still on the run and his location is unknown. Meanwhile, the man who fired the fatal shot has been convicted and sentenced to 52 years in prison. 2 accomplices who participated in the car chase and coordinated with the shooter have each been sentenced to 50 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Brianna Marie Schneller. Brianna Marie Schneller was an 18-year-old with a vibrant personality who loved Mexican food, music, dancing, and roller coasters. She was an exceptional student, and ranking as the top student at Everest High School in Washington, according to her parents, Craig and Lori Schneller. Brianna had a promising future ahead, with a trip to Tennessee planned for the summer and a notable achievement as the only student in Wisconsin to qualify for a national competition in professional and technical fields. Brianna's passion was to pursue a career in restaurant management and eventually start her own business in the food service industry. To gain experience and skills, she worked part-time at El Mezcal restaurant in Rib Mountain. Those who knew her, including friends, colleagues, and customers, described her as kind and responsive. Brianna's life was on the verge of 2 major events: her graduation and her wedding to her 22 years old fiancé, Sebastian Ramirez. Brianna's parents initially disapproved of her relationship with Sebastian due to their age difference and concerns that she was growing up too quickly. However, after getting to know Sebastian better, they began to trust him and saw that he genuinely loved Brianna and had serious plans for their future together. They eventually moved in together, sharing an apartment on 12th Avenue in Wow with Sebastian's 19-year-old younger brother, Hugo. To outsiders, it seemed like the 3 of them got along well and lived harmoniously, burning the envy of many for their close friendship. Sebastian and Hugo supported Brianna's interests and also worked with her at a local restaurant called El Tequila Salsa. It's likely that this is where Sebastian and Brianna first met. Despite their seemingly perfect life, tragedy struck on May 2, 2009. The day began like any other, with Sebastian waking up early and trying not to disturb Brianna, who was still sleeping peacefully beside him. It was a day off from school, and she had no reason to wake up early. Brianna woke up while her boyfriend was in the shower. They exchanged affectionate greetings and discussed their plans for the day. Meanwhile, Sebastian tried to rouse Hugo, who had returned home early that morning after a late-night party. Hugo was clearly hungover. After Sebastian left for work, which was just a short walk away, his younger brother followed suit. Brianna was left alone in the apartment. Later, Hugo was feeling unwell. His hangover was severe, and he was struggling to concentrate. He decided to take an early lunch break and headed home to rest. When he arrived at the apartment, everything seemed normal at first. However, as he entered his brother's room, he noticed that it was in disarray. Brianna was lying on the floor, unresponsive. Hugo rushed to her side and asked what was wrong, but she didn't answer. At first, he didn't notice the blood. Hugo discovered a horrific scene when he removed a towel covering a woman's face. Her severe injuries had left Hugo almost unrecognizable, and he was utterly shocked and overcome with grief at the sight of her. Despite his distress, he knew he had to act quickly and ran to his neighbor's apartment on the floor below for help. The neighbor, a woman, called emergency services at 1:30 p.m., who was too distraught to speak clearly. The emergency operator received the call and was told that she was the girlfriend of Sebastian. She was lying on the floor, severely injured with cuts all over her body and a badly disfigured face. The operator was informed that she showed no signs of life. Police and paramedics rushed to the apartment building after receiving a call. When they arrived, they found a crowded parking lot, but one person stood out, Hugo Ramirez. He approached the officers and led them to the apartment where the incident occurred. Inside, they found a disturbing scene. Brianna's body was severely injured, with deep stab wounds on her chest, neck, and wrist. Hugo was visibly shaken and could barely speak as he led officers to the apartment. He simply pointed to Brianna's body, and the officers took note of the scene. The officers asked Hugo to leave the room so that forensic specialists could begin their examination. The specialists observed that the blood on the floor had already started to dry, suggesting that Brianna's body had been there for some time. It was clear that she had tried to defend herself, as evidenced by the defensive cuts on her arms. However, the attacker had overpowered her, leaving behind a crime scene with a significant amount of evidence. The forensic team found several key pieces of evidence, including a bloody iron on the floor, which appeared to have been used to strike Brianna's face. The iron was broken, with pieces scattered nearby. 2 knives were found in the bathroom sink, one of which was missing its sharp tip. Blood was also found on the soap, suggesting that the attacker had washed their hands after the crime. However, the most notable piece of evidence was a bloodied shoe print on the carpet, which drew the investigators' attention. The investigation of the house uncovered many new details. Notably, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that the victim may have known her attacker or that the perpetrator had a way to enter the apartment without breaking in. Additionally, a large sum of money was found scattered throughout the apartment, consisting of bills ranging from $1 to $20. According to Hugo, this money was comprised of tips they had accumulated at work, which were carelessly left lying around. At first glance, it appeared that nothing was missing from the apartment, indicating that the attack was not motivated by robbery. This theory was further supported by the discovery of a broken knife tip in the victim's body. The fact that the knife broke during the attack indicates that the perpetrator applied considerable force. It's crucial to grasp what may have motivated someone to hold such intense feelings of anger and aggression against she. Uncovering the cause of this brutal and unprecedented attack is crucial in shedding light on the matter. Craig and Laura Schneller anxiously waited at the police station, having heard that something terrible had happened at their daughter's home. Unfortunately, they had been unable to contact Brianna, and their hearts were heavy with worry. The officers had to tell the parents Brianna that their worst fears had come true. The news was devastating. Their daughter, Brianna, had passed away. The loss of a child is one of the greatest sorrows a parent can experience, and for the Schnellers, it was a life-altering moment. To confirm the identity, the authorities showed them photographs of Brianna, but only those that clearly showed her face, as some of the other images were too graphic. After confirming the tragic news, the Schnellers were in shock. With the help of a psychologist, they were able to compose themselves and answer questions from the police. They were eager to assist in the investigation and help catch the person responsible. The Schnellers provided as much information as they could about their daughter's life, but they insisted that she had no known enemies. They also revealed that Brianna's mother had been the last person she had spoken to that morning. Her mother, Craig, took Brianna's car to the repair shop and messaged her daughter around 10 a.m. to let her know. Brianna replied to the message. The investigation shows that the tragedy occurred at a point in time that was after they sent messages to each other and before Hugo's arrival. As part of their inquiry, detectives first interviewed the Ramirez brothers, Sebastian and Hugo, questioning them separately. Sebastian, Brianna's fiancé, stated that he woke up at 9:15 a.m., had a brief conversation with Brianna while getting ready for work, and then woke up his brother, Hugo, around 10:15 a.m. Sebastian claimed he was already at the restaurant when he received a phone call informing him about the incident. Hugo's account corroborated Sebastian's, saying he left the house around 10:15 a.m., shortly after his brother. He returned home at 1:20 p.m. due to feeling unwell and wanting to rest. When Hugo found Brianna's body, his reported illness and fatigue vanished almost instantly. The events that followed were a daze. He was so shocked that he couldn't think clearly about how to respond. His mind went blank, and his hands shook uncontrollably, prompting him to seek help from a neighbor. The Ramirez brothers' accounts were believable, and their distress seemed authentic. Nevertheless, the police had seen convincing performances before, so they needed concrete evidence to confirm their innocence. It was possible that one of the brothers was involved in the crime, and the other was covering for him. To investigate this, detectives asked about their relationships with each other. Sebastian expressed his love for Brianna and his excitement for their upcoming wedding. Hugo was questioned about whether he had any issues with Brianna or if they had argued, but he denied it. Hugo also explained that while he found her attractive and charming, he had no romantic intentions towards her because he valued his good relationship with his brother and would never jeopardize his happiness. Brianna was like a sister to Hugo. And after hours of questioning, neither Hugo nor Sebastian raised any suspicions. The police took DNA samples from the brothers and allowed them to return home. To verify the brothers' alibis, detectives spoke with employees of El Tequila Salsa restaurant and reviewed the restaurant's security footage. The brothers' accounts checked out, and the possibility of a domestic-related crime was ruled out. The investigation continued, and the question remained, who could have committed such a heinous crime against an innocent young woman? Was there a predator lurking in the city who had been watching Brianna and waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The police considered this possibility as they analyzed the evidence. The autopsy results confirmed the police's initial suspicions. The sequence of events was reconstructed as follows. Brianna was first hit on the head with a blunt object, likely an iron, which caused a severe injury. The perpetrator then cut her throat and inflicted multiple stab wounds to her body. The attack was extremely violent, with so many wounds that even experts couldn't count them all. At least 2 of the injuries were fatal. DNA from an unknown source was found under Brianna's fingernails, indicating that she struggled and resisted her attacker. Initial reports that nothing was missing from Brianna's home were later found to be incorrect. Brianna's phone had actually been taken, and Sebastian was the one who discovered its loss and informed the detectives. This new information became a crucial lead in the investigation. The police learned from the phone provider that the phone was still active and obtained its location. Surprisingly, the phone was found to be nearby, specifically on the premises of the restaurant where Sebastian and Hugo worked. This revelation added complexity to the case, given the brothers' solid alibi and the suspicious circumstances surrounding the missing phone. The detectives rushed to the location and found that the phone's coordinates led them to the parking lot of a shopping center that housed the restaurant. A search of the area revealed that the phone was likely in one of the trash bins. After a brief search, a plastic takeout bag with the logo of El Tequila Salsa was found in a container. Inside the bag were the victim's phone, 2 mismatched gloves, and a pair of women's underwear. One of the gloves had a bloodstain. The bag and its contents were sent to the lab for further analysis, which could potentially yield fingerprints or DNA from the perpetrator. After seeing a photo of the bag's contents, Sebastian identified his girlfriend's underwear. The police then questioned the restaurant staff multiple times. On May 5th, they asked everyone to provide a DNA sample and checked for any scratches or injuries. They also carefully reviewed all the surveillance footage, both inside and outside the building and nearby businesses. The police had a challenging task to figure out who had thrown away the bag. A kitchen worker initially caught the investigators' attention because he arrived late to work after Brianna had already been found lifeless. However, he had a solid alibi. He had been pulled over for speeding on his way to the restaurant. Reviewing the security footage was crucial to the investigation, which led them to another suspect, Raul Ponce Rocha, the 24-year-old kitchen manager. On the day of the crime, Raul left the building at 10:18 a.m. wearing a brown hoodie and returned 35 minutes later, at 10:53 a.m., without it. When questioned, Raul explained that he had gone to pick up his friend Luciano, a dishwasher at the restaurant, who lived in the same building as Brianna and her colleagues. Raul claimed the trip took about 20 minutes, but there was a 15-minute gap in his timeline that he refused to explain. Luciano corroborated Raul's story, stating they drove straight to work without stopping. Nevertheless, the detectives remained skeptical about the unaccounted 15 minutes and Raul's suspicious behavior. Raul Ponce Rocha, the manager of El Tequila Salsa, had raised suspicions due to the cuts on his hands, which he claimed were from working with knives. However, there was not enough evidence to detain him at that point. Further investigation revealed that on May 2nd at 1:16 p.m., a single employee had exited the back door of the restaurant, and at the same time, only one person had approached the trash bins. This led to the quick identification of the suspect, who was surprisingly Raul Ponce Rocha, not Sebastian or Hugo Ramirez as initially suspected. A search warrant was obtained for Raul's home, and the search uncovered some peculiar items. Under his mattress, investigators found 4 pairs of women's underwear, several adult videos, a brown hoodie, and a glove similar to the one found in the trash bin. On the same day, Raul's DNA samples were sent for comparison with those found on the plastic bag, and a strand of female hair found on his clothing was also analyzed. All the evidence pointed to Brianna. It was only a matter of time before the test results confirmed the match. Raul was eventually arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder. Sebastian was stunned when he learned that a suspect had been identified in the brutal crime. He had trouble believing that his co-worker, Raul Ponce Rocha, could be capable of such a heinous act. What motivated Raul to commit this crime, especially since he barely knew Brianna? Sebastian's impression of Raul was that he was a friendly and harmless person. The mystery began to unravel in 2011 when Raul stood trial. Despite a lengthy investigation, Raul consistently denied any involvement in the crime and never admitted guilt. However, the prosecution presented strong evidence that contradicted his claims. Raul's DNA was found on several key pieces of evidence, including the iron, knives, a plastic bag, and its contents, as well as under Brianna's fingernails. A shoe print at the crime scene also matched Raul's shoes. The evidence pieced together the events of May 2, 2009. On his way to work that day, Raul passed by Brianna's house, a place that had long fascinated him. Assuming she was out, since her car was not in the driveway, he took advantage of the opportunity to break into her apartment and take what he wanted. Raul had a disturbing habit of collecting women's underwear, with evidence found hidden under his mattress. On the day of the incident, Raul left work, supposedly to pick up his friend Luciano, but instead entered Brianna's apartment without warning. He easily gained entry, suggesting he may have had a key, and went directly to Brianna's room, where he began rummaging through her belongings. When Brianna confronted him, Raul was likely caught off guard and feared being recognized. Panicked, he grabbed the nearest object, an iron, and used it to strike her. He then escalated the violence by slashing her throat with a knife and inflicting multiple other injuries. The investigation found that the killer appeared to take pleasure in the brutal act, as evidenced by the numerous and excessive wounds inflicted on the victim. The attacker also used multiple knives during the assault. After committing the crime, Raul attempted to cover his tracks by washing his hands and removing his jacket, which was likely stained with blood. He then calmly returned to work, pretending nothing had happened, and drove Luciano to the restaurant as planned. Raul took advantage of the lunch break to dispose of the evidence bag in a trash bin, which was captured on the kitchen's video recordings. Before the trial, Raul admitted to meeting with Brianna but claimed he didn't kill her. However, he suspected someone else might have and named a former restaurant employee. Raul stated that he saw this acquaintance, Sergio, at Brianna's house on the day she died. This confirmed that Raul had indeed entered the Ramirez apartment. However, when Raul left, Sergio stayed behind and had an argument with Brianna. Raul's statement raised more questions and led to further investigations. The authorities verified the information and managed to contact Sergio, who was abroad at the time. Sergio appeared at the trial and testified that he was not involved in Brianna's death. He proved that he was not in the country on the day of the crime, as he had left weeks earlier to care for his ill father in Mexico. It became clear that Raul had hoped to falsely accuse Sergio and create doubt among the jurors. However, his plan failed, and Raul's actions showed that he had no qualms about accusing an innocent person of a heinous crime, and he felt no remorse for his actions. The trial of Raul Ponce Rocha drew a large crowd, including Brianna's family members and her friends Sebastian and Hugo. The young men struggled to keep their emotions in check, prompting officers to intervene multiple times to restore calm. In the end, Raul was found guilty of murdering Brianna Schneller and burglary, and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving his sentence at a correctional facility in Wisconsin. After the verdict, Brianna's father expressed his gratitude that justice had been served. He shared that he still keeps a Father's Day card Brianna gave him and cherishes every memory of her. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ilana Frick. Ilana Christina Frick was born in September 1977 in Windsor, Ontario, to George and Anna, who had immigrated to Canada from Croatia in the early 1970s. She was the younger of two daughters, with an older sister named Caroline, with whom she was extremely close. Ilana's birth was considered a miracle by her parents. Her mother, Anna, had faced serious health complications after her first pregnancy, and doctors had told them that Anna would likely never conceive again. Anna and George made a significant effort to ensure their daughter's well-being and meet their needs, in spite of the difficulties they faced. They both worked at a car factory, striving to give Ilana and Caroline a good education and a comfortable life. Growing up, Ilana was a diligent and passionate student. She spent most of her free time reading, also found time to attend dance classes, practice gymnastics, and compete in track and field events. During her summer breaks, Ilana chose to work to help support her family, often working in cornfields and learning to manage her finances wisely. As she progressed through school, Ilana excelled in math and science, and by the time she reached high school, she had set her sights on a career in medicine. Ilana graduated at the top of her high school class and was accepted into a prestigious medical university. Around the same time, she started dating Matthew Ryan, a classmate from high school who was also studying in the same department. They maintained a long-distance relationship after graduation, with Ilana moving to Ottawa to pursue a residency program at the university. Matthew, on the other hand, chose to work at a local hospital and did not pursue further education. Despite the distance, Ilana and Matthew's relationship continued until nearly 2002. They had even made plans to get married, but ultimately decided to remain friends. By then, Ilana was interning at a top clinic and was working towards earning a doctorate, while Matthew's career had not advanced. In February 2003, during a night shift at the hospital, Ilana met Mohammed Shamji, a new colleague. She was immediately drawn to him. Mohammed, who was just a year older than Ilana, was a resident in the neurosurgery department and came from a family of prominent doctors. Mohammed Shamji was born and raised in Ottawa, Ontario, into a family of medical professionals. His father, Farid Shamji, was a well-known surgeon, and his mother, Edith, was a talented psychiatrist. Mohammed's older brother, Ali, also pursued a career in medicine, becoming a medical biophysicist. Both brothers attended Yale University, and later, Mohammed returned to Canada to earn his doctoral degree from the University of Western Ontario. Additionally, Mohammed had taken an interest in a blonde woman, but at first, he did not make any attempts to approach her. Ilana was immediately drawn to Mohammed, a tall, dark-skinned man, and sought to capture his attention. He eventually asked for her number and initiated contact, marking the beginning of their romance. Initially, Ilana perceived Mohammed as a reserved individual who hesitated on dates, jumped between topics, or fell silent, giving the impression of being introverted. However, it was later discovered that his behavior was not due to shyness but rather a lack of interest. Unbeknownst to Ilana, Mohammed was seeing another woman at the time and intentionally kept this a secret. When Ilana discovered she had a rival, she became resolute in her determination to be the only woman in his life. The first year of their relationship was tumultuous, with they breaking up on 3 separate occasions, rekindling. This was largely due to Ilana's persistence in pursuing the relationship. Despite her parents' awareness of the issues and their encouragement to leave Mohammed, Ilana remained resolute, convinced that she had found her soulmate. Ilana often showered Mohammed with gifts, surprises, and home-cooked meals, but he only sporadically reciprocated her affection. Mohammed seemed content to accept Ilana's displays of love without feeling obligated to return them. This dynamic created an emotional imbalance, where Ilana grew increasingly dependent on Mohammed. In the summer of 2004, Ilana and Mohammed received unexpected news: Ilana unplanned pregnancy. A sudden life-changing event forced them to rethink their future plans. While both were anxious about the news, Mohammed felt a strong obligation to marry Ilana before the baby was born, as is traditional in his conservative Muslim upbringing. In September 2004, they had a 2-part wedding. The first ceremony adhered to Mohammed's family's cultural customs, while the second was a more casual celebration with friends at a popular restaurant. At the time, the newlyweds seemed happy and in love. However, their happiness was short-lived. When their daughter, Yasmin, was born in January 2005, their marital problems became apparent. Mohammed's focus on his career and education left Ilana and their newborn daughter feeling neglected. To make matters worse, Mohammed had been hoping for a son and wasn't afraid to express his disappointment. This marked the beginning of a troubled marriage that would ultimately end in tragedy. After having her child, Ilana took maternity leave to care for her daughter and manage the household. When Mohammed returned home, he would often go straight to his room and spend very little time with his wife and children, which left Ilana feeling abandoned and unappreciated. As time passed, Mohammed's behavior worsened, and he became increasingly critical and abusive. He would insult Ilana's appearance, refuse to eat her cooking, berating and insulting his wife. Despite her growing unhappiness, Ilana chose not to confide in anyone, including her close friends and parents, about her marital problems. However, one day, while Ilana was on the phone with her mother, Mohammed returned home in a bad mood and began berating Ilana in front of her mother. Ilana's mother tried to defend her, but Mohammed shifted the blame onto Ilana, claiming she was responsible for their troubled marriage. Ilana's mother advised her to end the relationship with Mohammed and file for divorce, but Ilana declined, hoping that she could still salvage the marriage. Unfortunately, Mohammed's actions worsened, and he started physically harming Ilana on top of the verbal abuse she had already been enduring. The situation reached a boiling point in the summer of 2005 when Mohammed punched Ilana in the face, breaking her nose. Fearing for her safety and that of her child, Ilana fled to friends and reported the incident to the police, finally deciding to end the marriage and leave Muhammad for good. Muhammad surprisingly begged his wife, Ilana, to come back, vowing to never physically abuse her again or even raise his voice. He promised that their family life would be perfect and he would control his temper. However, Muhammad's sudden change of heart was motivated by self-interest. As a young neurosurgeon, he was about to start at Duke University, working towards his doctorate, and a criminal conviction would ruin his promising medical career. Muhammad's primary concern was his own future, but he successfully convinced Ilana to drop the charges against him. She even agreed to follow him to North Carolina, where he would pursue his studies. Ilana's loved ones were confused when she didn't leave her husband despite the difficulties she was facing. Instead, she moved to another country with Muhammad. When they encouraged her to reconsider, she stood her ground. When the family settled in the US, life appeared more tranquil for a time. Muhammad earned a highly competitive spot in an elite engineering program. Meanwhile, Ilana joined Duke University on a full tuition scholarship. Their relationship grew stronger and became more confident in their decision to have more children. After the arrival of their daughter Fiza, they welcomed another child. Unlike their son's relatively smooth birth, Fiza's delivery was more challenging. The new addition to the family brought immense joy, and they felt grateful for their family growing closer. What secrets lay hidden behind the perfect facade of this family? In the late summer of 2009, Ilana and her husband, along with their children, returned to Ottawa, Canada, and settled back into their home. Ilana, however, soon ended her maternity leave and secured a job as a family doctor at a renowned hospital, quickly building a solid reputation. Her husband, meanwhile, juggled work, studies, and teaching at a university. As social media gained popularity in the late 2000s, they started a personal blog that portrayed them as an ideal family. They shared photos of their vacations, accomplishments in science, and luxury lifestyle, complete with a lavish home. They even posted about attending prestigious conferences and trendy resorts. To outsiders, they seemed like a happy, successful, wealthy, and deeply in love couple with no problems. However, this perfect image hid a dark reality. Behind closed doors, Muhammad continued to exert strict control over Ilana. He monitored her interactions, dictated what she wore, and even checked her email and social media accounts. He openly criticized her appearance, style, and parenting methods, leaving Ilana feeling silent and trapped. As time passed, the tension and aggression between them became stressed, with Muhammad frequently yelling at Ilana and blaming her for their arguments and discord. In 2011, a prestigious medical center in Calgary offered a talented neurosurgeon, Muhammad, a fellowship in spinal surgery. Muhammad accepted the offer and relocated to Calgary, but he had to leave his family in Ottawa because his wife, Ilana, couldn't take a leave of absence from her job for over a year. They had to manage a long-distance relationship. During one of Muhammad's visits home, their relationship faced its biggest challenge yet. While at home, Muhammad accidentally left his laptop open, and Ilana saw a message from another woman on his social media account. The content of the message implied a romantic involvement. When Ilana confronted Muhammad, he confessed to having an affair, which was a devastating blow to Ilana. Ilana's family believed that this was the final straw, and they were convinced that she wouldn't forgive Muhammad again. However, Ilana decided to give their marriage another chance. Muhammad promised to end the affair, and they decided to start fresh in Toronto, where Muhammad had secured a high-paying job. Despite this fresh start, their marital issues persisted. After their move to Toronto, Muhammad expressed his desire to have a son, and Ilana agreed to try again, hoping that a new child would bring stability to their family. In October 2013, they had a son named Marius, a long-awaited addition to their family. Despite the new baby, his behavior towards his wife remained unchanged. Over the next few years, he devoted himself to his medical career, becoming a skilled and respected neurosurgeon known for his ability to tackle complex cases that other doctors avoided. Meanwhile, the wife also advanced in her career, becoming a representative for the Ontario Medical Association. However, the tension between them began to escalate, and his behavior towards his wife became increasingly aggressive. He went beyond verbal abuse, resorting to physical violence against her. During a family ski trip, the wife suffered a deep cut on her arm that required stitches, as well as other injuries. She initially claimed that the injuries were a result of a skiing accident. However, she later confided in her best friend that the injuries were actually inflicted by her husband. Following another heated argument over his latest infidelity, Ilana discovered that her husband, Mohammed, was having an affair with a colleague. After overhearing a suspicious phone conversation, Ilana confronted him, which led to a violent outburst, and he physically abused her. A friend, who was aware of the situation, advised Ilana to end her marriage, but she refused. Her friend jokingly suggested that Ilana should retaliate by having an affair of her own. Although the suggestion was made in jest, Ilana might have considered it a viable option to get back at her unfaithful husband. During the summer of 2016, their relationship continued to deteriorate. Their children were away at camp or staying with their grandparents, leaving Ilana and Mohammed to face their marital problems alone. In a surprising turn of events, they celebrated their 12th wedding anniversary in early September, even sharing the news on social media. However, their happiness was short-lived, as they began discussing divorce just a week later. Despite his marital transgressions, Mohammed refused to acknowledge his actions as grounds for divorce, claiming that he was happy with his current situation. On the other hand, a desperate Ilana initiated an affair with a coworker who had been flirting with her, escalating their relationship turmoil. Elena found herself swept up in a new romance, feeling cherished and adored by her partner. This was a welcome change from her current situation, and she reveled in the long-absent sensation of being loved and desired. However, her personal life was about to take a dramatic turn. A fierce argument erupted in the family on November 25, 2016. Elena informed her husband that their divorce was unavoidable. The following day, she consulted with a divorce attorney and then departed for a 3-day medical conference in another city. While Elena was away, her husband, Mohammed, sent her a series of messages, begging her to reconsider and work on saving their marriage for the sake of their children. Elena returned home on November 30th and made a final phone call to her parents. Although her voice betrayed some anxiety, she reassured them that everything was okay. Unbeknownst to her family, Elena had attempted to call the police that evening, but in her distress, she accidentally misdialed the number, leading to a devastating outcome. On December 1st, Anna tried to contact her daughter Ilana but was unable to reach her. Concerned, Anna called her son-in-law Mohammed to ask what was wrong. Mohammed claimed that Ilana had packed her bags in the middle of the night and left him and their children to be with her lover. However, Anna and her husband were skeptical of Mohammed's story, knowing that their daughter would never abandon her children. They asked a close friend of Ilana's to keep an eye on the Mohammed home while they traveled to Toronto to report Ilana's disappearance to the police. The friend reported that Ilana's car was still parked in the driveway, which only added to the family's concern. When Anna and her husband arrived at their daughter's house, they didn't notice anything out of the ordinary at first. However, Mohammed was agitated and insisted that Ilana was with her lover, repeating the same story he had told the police earlier. After Ilana was reported missing, a shocking discovery was made. The police found a body inside a suitcase. A man walking his dog by the river on December 2nd noticed a new-looking suitcase under a bridge about 24 miles from the suspect Mohammed's home. His curiosity got the best of him, so he opened the suitcase, discovering the body of a blonde woman. The police were immediately notified, and the body was taken to the medical examiner for identification and analysis. Fortunately, identifying the owner of the suitcase was not difficult because the perpetrator had left the luggage tag attached, which still had her name and travel information from her recent trip. Her parents confirmed the identity as Ilana. An autopsy revealed her cause of death to be mechanical asphyxiation and a broken neck. Additionally, her body showed signs of abuse with multiple bruises and abrasions. Notably, the victim was found dressed in pajamas with no shoes. Considering the victim's position in clothes, it appears she was placed inside the suitcase immediately after her death. The investigation led to the suspect's arrest later that evening at a coffee shop. Evidence indicated he was planning to leave the country. A lawyer accompanied the suspect during his meeting at the time of arrest. However, law enforcement thwarted the escape. Subsequently, Muhammad, the prime witness turned suspect, was arrested, formally charging him with Ilana's first-degree murder. Muhammad denied any involvement in the incident, but a disturbing detail soon came to light. Their 12-year-old daughter, Yasmin, had unintentionally witnessed her mother's murder. Yasmin reported hearing screams and noise coming from her parents' room, prompting her to rush there. She opened the door slightly and saw her father kneeling behind the bed, while her mother was likely on the floor, out of her sight. Muhammad ordered Yasmin to leave the room immediately, shut the door, and go back to bed. The next morning, he told his daughters that their mother had left. Despite her young age, Yasmin sensed that something terrible had occurred, but she couldn't fathom that her father was responsible for her mother's death. To avoid putting his daughter through the trauma of testifying in court, the accused confessed to the crime. He recounted the events of that fateful evening, stating that he and his wife had argued over her alleged infidelity and desire for a divorce. Muhammad claimed that he didn't intend to harm his wife, but the situation escalated rapidly. The argument turned violent, and when his wife tried to call the police, he knocked the phone out of her hand. She began screaming, and Muhammad struck her multiple times in the face before pinning her to the floor and strangling her with his hands. Muhammad's daughter entered the room, but couldn't see what had happened behind the bed. By the time Muhammad realized his wife was not breathing, it was too late. In a desperate attempt to revive her, he made a fatal mistake, breaking her neck. Panicked, he placed her body in a large suitcase and drove around for hours, unsure of what to do. Eventually, he stopped at a small bridge over a river and threw the suitcase into the water, hoping the current would carry it away. However, the suitcase got stuck against the bridge's foundation, hidden in the darkness. During the trial of the surgeon, a scandal emerged involving his father, Farid Shamji. The elderly man made derogatory comments about his deceased daughter-in-law, trying to justify his son's actions by claiming she had been unfaithful and provoked him. As a result, his medical license was revoked. Muhammad was found guilty of second-degree murder in April 2019 and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, he may be eligible for parole in 14 years, considering the time he served during the trial. This means he could be released as early as 2030. Additionally, Muhammad was prohibited from contacting his children or his wife's parents and was ordered to pay them a substantial amount of compensation. His medical license was also permanently revoked, preventing him from practicing medicine or teaching again. The children who have lost their parents are now being cared for by Ilana's parents. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lynsey Wilson. Lynsey Wilson was born in 1982 in the small town of White Eyes, Ohio, to a devoutly Christian family. Her father was a pastor, and she was raised with strong religious values. Despite her strict upbringing, Lynsey was an adventurous and active child who enjoyed sports and later developed a passion for hiking and extreme tourism. After completing her education, Lynsey attended Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia, where she honed her outdoor skills. She regularly went on hikes, climbed mountains, and rafted down rivers, often organizing her own expeditions. Lynsey's dream was to establish a summer camp for children and teenagers, where she could teach them wilderness survival skills, rafting, and other outdoor activities. Jason Allen was born in 1978 in Zeeland, Michigan, to a deeply religious family. As a teenager, he became fascinated with hiking and wilderness survival. Jason was a tall, athletic, and charismatic individual who possessed natural leadership qualities, which drew like-minded people to him. He was passionate about exploring new heights and mastering outdoor skills. Lynsey and Jason met in 2002 during a hiking trip in the Appalachian Mountains. At the time, Lynsey was still a student, while Jason worked as a mountain guide and climbing instructor. They quickly formed a connection after meeting for the first time, leading the young man to ask for her hand in marriage just 6 months later. Both sets of parents gave their approval, and the young man proposed to his girlfriend with a beautiful diamond ring. Shortly after, he gave her a second engagement ring. As a couple, they made ambitious plans for their future. They intended to get married in September 2004 and buy a spacious house to raise a family. But things didn't turn out as expected. Before their wedding, they worked as senior counselors at a Christian summer camp called Rock and Water in California's El Dorado County. Their goal was to gain experience and eventually open their own camp after the wedding. On the Friday evening of August 14th, Lynsey and Jason decided to take a weekend trip to the San Francisco area. Before leaving, they informed their colleagues of their plans and left 2 experienced counselors in charge of the camp, ensuring a smooth transition. They told everyone they would return by Monday, expecting no issues for either themselves or their temporary replacements. With their plan in place, they set off in Lynsey's 1992 red Ford Tempo, and unfortunately, this was the last time anyone saw them alive. By Sunday evening, Jason and Lynsey, both counselors, had not returned to camp, but their absence did not raise immediate concern. It was assumed they would arrive late that night or early Monday. However, when they failed to appear at the Monday morning roll call at 8 a.m. and their phones were unreachable, their colleagues grew worried. The group quickly notified the police and then reached out to Jason and Lynsey's families to inform them about the situation. The parents went to the camp right away to get more information about the incident. Their colleagues were particularly concerned because Jason and Lynsey were known for their reliability and punctuality. If they had encountered any issues, they would have likely found a way to communicate. Upon arriving at the camp, law enforcement officials began questioning their colleagues, but the investigation quickly hit a roadblock. No one knew exactly where Jason and Lynsey had gone. They had planned to explore the San Francisco area, but their love for adventure and extreme activities made it likely that they were in a remote location with no access to communication or civilization. The police decided to wait for 48 hours, allowing the missing couple a window to possibly return home by themselves. In the meantime, concerned relatives and friends didn't want to delay any longer, and therefore decided to start searching. They reached out to everyone in their network, trying to gather information about the last time someone had contact with they. A missing person flyer featuring a photo of they was circulated, asking witnesses to report any potential sightings right away. By Tuesday, law enforcement had joined the search. The main focus was on the San Francisco area, its surrounding suburbs, and nearby localities. However, the large terrain made it challenging to thoroughly search every inch. A friend's insight that they frequently visited the secluded and picturesque rocky beaches led the police to concentrate on these locations. As the search effort dragged on for days, with several bodies found in sleeping bags in the targeted areas, the likelihood of finding they alive decreased significantly. On Wednesday, August 19th, a helicopter patrol spotted 2 bodies in sleeping bags on a remote rocky beach, indicating that the individuals were likely deceased rather than just resting. Upon arriving at the scene, police found a red Ford Tempo parked near a tourist shelter in a steep trail leading to a scenic beach. The car was identified as belonging to missing student Lynsey Wilson after a database check. As officers descended the trail, they discovered two people in sleeping bags, who initially appeared to be sleeping. However, they did not respond to calls or noise. Closer inspection revealed that the individuals, a young man and woman, were deceased, with no signs of life. Preliminary examination suggested that they had been killed by gunshot wounds to the head, and the smell of decomposition indicated they had been there for over a day. All of their belongings, including phones, wallets, bank cards, and cash, were found next to them, ruling out robbery as a motive. The car keys were also visible, eliminating car theft as a motive. Investigators initially believed the deceased were the young couple who had gone missing near San Francisco the previous week. Documents found at the scene confirmed the identities of the victims as Lynsey Wilson and Jason Allen. However, formal identification by their relatives was still necessary. When the parents arrived, they were overcome with grief upon recognizing the bodies of their children. The investigation led police to rule out initial theories of robbery or carjacking due to the presence of untouched valuables, money, and keys at the scene. Forensic analysis also showed no signs of physical or intimate assault on the bodies, except for the fatal gunshot wounds to the head. It appeared that Lynsey and Jason were peacefully sleeping and did not have time to react to the attack. They showed no signs of trying to defend themselves, escape, or even get out of their sleeping bags, indicating a sudden and deliberate act that was similar to an execution or a revenge killing. The brutal murder of two individuals on a secluded beach left investigators with many questions but no clear answers. The beach was difficult to access, and there were no signs of anyone else being in the area. Despite a thorough search, no shell casings were found, leading investigators to believe that the shooter may have taken them or thrown them into the ocean. The fact that the shots were fired at close range into the victim's head suggested that the casings should have been nearby if they hadn't been deliberately moved. A search of the area revealed an empty beer bottle a few meters from the crime scene. This was notable because Lynsey and Jason did not drink alcohol and led a healthy lifestyle, suggesting that the bottle may have belonged to the shooter. The brand of beer was unusual for the area and was more commonly found in a neighboring state. Although it was unclear whether the bottle was connected to the crime, it was considered a significant lead in the investigation. A theory emerged that Lynsey and Jason may have had a confrontation with someone the day before their deaths, and this person may have returned at night with a gun to settle the dispute. Although Jason and Lynsey were known for being friendly, it was possible they may have unknowingly offended someone. Additionally, the shooter may have been intoxicated or mentally unstable. Examination of the bullets found in the victim's skulls showed they came from a rare Marlin rifle, specifically a .45 caliber Model 18, produced in 1994 by Marlin Firearms Company. This type of rifle was typically used for hunting and was often part of a collector's arsenal. This discovery was a significant lead in the investigation, but it remained the only concrete clue at the time. Investigation suggested that the shooter was likely a lone male. He may have been a hunter, collector, or gun enthusiast. To further the investigation, authorities aimed to reconstruct their final route, identify who they may have contacted, and determine when they were last seen alive. Fortunately, they had taken many photos, and their camera was found intact among their belongings, which provided a useful starting point for tracking their movements. A guest book at a tourist cabin near the lookout point, where they had parked their car, contained entries expressing their delight with the weekend getaway. They had also visited a fishing pier about 20 miles away on Saturday, as evidenced by the photographs they took. Police officers returned to the pier and interviewed locals to find people who may have seen something significant. Several people remembered a young couple in a red car who inquired about overnight accommodations but found all three nearby hotels fully booked due to peak tourist season. They had dinner at a local restaurant, walked around the area, and took photos before leaving in the evening. According to those who saw and interacted with them, they was friendly, did not engage in any conflicts, and seemed carefree and happy. However, none of the witnesses could recall anything unusual or suspicious. The location where the bodies were found was a protected area, closed to camping. However, the young couple had nowhere else to stay overnight, so they decided to camp on the beach, using sleeping bags instead of a tent. They felt safe on the secluded beach on a warm August night and planned to return to the rock and water camp on Sunday. This information helped investigators narrow down the time frame of their deaths. Since they went to sleep but didn't survive until morning, it's likely they were killed between 11 p.m. on Saturday and dawn on Sunday. Despite the ongoing investigation and public appeals for information, police withheld certain details, including the results of the ballistics analysis. This action was taken to prevent the suspect from being tipped off and getting rid of the murder weapon before the investigation could start. The investigation first focused on a local homeless man who was known to sleep on the beach where the crime occurred. He was found and questioned by police, but despite not having an alibi for the night of the crime, he was not confirmed to be involved. The main reasons for this were that the murder weapon was never found and his DNA did not match the DNA found on a beer bottle discovered at the crime scene. The case went cold for nearly 2 years, but in the spring of 2006, police decided to release more information about the crime, including details about the weapon used. They also offered a $50,000 reward for any information that could help identify the perpetrator and solve the case. Following the public appeal, authorities received over 1,000 calls, but only a few were useful for the investigation. One individual, 26 years old Sean Gallen, drew particular attention from several locals who described him as an aggressive collector of firearms and blades. He was reportedly prone to conflicts, had a history of property damage, and frequently threatened violent behavior. The police investigated Sean Gallen and questioned him because they already knew him from previous incidents involving fights and drunk driving. Upon inspecting his possessions, Sean did possess numerous weapons but did not own the rifle in question. Authorities were unable to verify his whereabouts around the time of the crime due to the year gap, and his DNA did not match the sample found on the beer bottle at the crime scene, forcing his release. Meanwhile, international authorities were investigating another individual, 61 years old Joseph Henry Burgess, who made locals nervous due to his tendency to carry firearms and exhibit aggressive behavior. Burgess was described as erratic, often claiming he received orders from God, sparking suspicion that he could be the perpetrator. Joseph Burgess was living in Canada in the late 1970s, feeling lost and without a clear sense of purpose or direction in his life. In 1978, he joined the Children of God commune, presenting himself as a deeply devoted individual. Those around him considered him excessively zealous. A rivalry with two young members escalated into hostility, and shortly after, both individuals were found dead with multiple close-range gunshot wounds to the head. The circumstances of their deaths were particularly notable. Their bodies were discovered in sleeping bags on a beach, suggesting they were shot while asleep. By the time the authorities arrived, Joseph had disappeared. Although evidence left behind implicated him in the crime, he had already fled to the United States, crossing the border illegally. Joseph managed to evade capture for nearly 25 years until the police linked him to a double homicide in California. However, the opportunity to question him was lost when a shootout occurred during his arrest, resulting in the deaths of both a police sergeant and Joseph, who initiated the gunfire. This ultimately unresolved case remained shrouded in mystery. A 35-year-old man named Seamus Gallen was killed by his younger brother, Sean Gallen. The brothers had gotten into an argument, during which Sean, who was under the influence of illicit substances, shot Seamus 3 times with a gun. Sean had a history with the police, having been previously investigated for a double murder on a beach, but was released due to lack of evidence. Since then, Sean had been in trouble with the law twice for causing property damage and making threats, but only received fines. It was also discovered that Sean was an avid hunter and enjoyed making knives and other bladed weapons. People who knew him described him as antisocial, aggressive, and unpredictable. After killing his brother, Sean tried to run away but was caught almost immediately. The police decided to take another look at Sean's possible involvement in a crime that happened 13 years ago. They found useful information on his social media page, where he had posted pictures of his large collection of weapons and talked about his supposed psychic abilities. According to his posts, Sean believed he was on a special mission and was receiving instructions from outer space. Sean's behavior initially led police to suspect that he had serious mental health issues. He refused to cooperate with the investigation, spoke incoherently, and maintained his innocence. A new lead was found by investigators who examined private messages on the deceased brother's social media page, something no one anticipated. In 2006, a $50,000 reward had been offered for information about a double homicide case. Sean's former girlfriend had messaged his brother, suggesting that she could claim the reward by turning Sean in. It appeared that both the girlfriend and the brother had knowledge about the case, but they had chosen to remain silent. Unfortunately, it was no longer possible to question either of them, as the brother had been shot and the girlfriend had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. However, when Sean was shown the printouts of the messages between his former girlfriend and his brother, he made a shocking confession. Despite his initial denials, Sean began to provide a detailed account of the events surrounding the double homicide. His recollection of the details was vivid, even though more than 13 years had passed since the crime occurred. One evening, a man left his house with a Marlin rifle, planning to hunt in a nearby wooded area. However, after wandering aimlessly for a couple of hours, he decided to head down to a nearby beach, which he believed was a good spot to find wild boars. As he walked along the shore, he came across 2 sleeping bags with a young man and woman asleep inside. He stood there watching them for several minutes, when suddenly he heard voices in his head telling him to kill them. The man claimed that this was a mission from outer space that he had to carry out. So, he pointed his rifle directly at the young man's head and fired, instantly killing him. The sound of the shot woke she, but before she could even process what was happening, the man fired again, killing her as well. He then picked up the spent casings and put them in an empty beer can he had been carrying. Later, he threw the can into some bushes in his father's backyard, where he also hid the rifle, asking his father to keep it for him. Sean's father hid the murder weapon in the cellar of his old barn without asking any questions. Remarkably, Sean's account of the crime was later confirmed. When the barn eventually collapsed, the rifle was discovered at the site, and a beer can with shell casings was still hidden in the overgrown bushes in the backyard. The property's abandonment after Sean's father passed away in 2009 had helped preserve these key pieces of evidence. A beer bottle found on the beach was initially considered evidence, but it was later discovered to be unrelated to the crime. Sean claimed that voices in his head ordered him to commit violent acts and that he was not aware of his actions when he committed the crime. His defense argued that Sean was mentally ill and unfit to stand trial. The court relied on expert psychiatrists to assess the validity of these claims. The psychiatric evaluation found that Sean did indeed suffer from multiple mental health disorders, which were exacerbated by his use of alcohol and prohibited substances. However, the evaluation also showed that at the time of the crime, Sean acted with deliberation and careful planning, fully aware of his actions and the need to cover his tracks to avoid detection. Specifically, Sean deliberately killed the young man first, knowing that she would be less able to resist or defend herself if anything went wrong. Sean carefully removed the casings and handed the rifle to his father, instructing him to conceal it. Although psychiatrists diagnosed Sean with mental issues, they concluded he was mentally fit to stand trial and be held accountable for his actions. Notably, his family and former girlfriend were aware of or suspected his involvement in the double homicide, yet none of them reported him to the police. Sean's trial took place in the spring of 2019, nearly 15 years after the double homicide. On June 17, 2019, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without parole, plus an additional 94 years for killing his brother in 2017. He is currently serving his sentence in a special prison unit for inmates with mental disorders. Due to his continued claims of hearing voices and aggressive behavior, he is closely monitored to prevent harm to himself or others. The motive behind the double homicide was never established. According to reports, Sean randomly encountered they sleeping on the beach and decided to end their lives without apparent reason.